My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 361, a turn-based battle. Those are the sea folks. The sea folks are invading. Hurry up and close the gate. A fierce battle was taking place at the floating city's main entrance. A few mermaids had wanted to attach themselves to the cargo ships to hitch a ride into the floating city. Unfortunately, when the guards were inspecting the cargo on the cargo ship, one of the mermaids did not hide properly and revealed her tail. The guards discovered them. After they were discovered, the gold-tier mermaids decided not to hide anymore. One of the mermaids threw a harpoon that hit one of the guards, who was then lying on the ground, bleeding non-stop. The remaining 3 guards frantically turned the valve outside the gate. However, one person was missing, and the mermaids were wantonly attacking the surrounding cargo ships, causing those cargo ships to try to enter the city frantically. Some of the enormous cargo ships were stuck at the gate, preventing the gate from closing properly. Abandon the cargo ships. We have to close the gate immediately. I'll count to 3. If all of you don't abandon the ships and escape, we won't be polite about it later. The guards at the gate had no choice but to shout at the ships that were frantically fleeing. Some people heard them, while some people pretended not to hear them. They abruptly pulled the secondary gate that was used to prevent the gate from getting stuck. That secondary gate was a stone gate that was also tens of tons in weight. Once it fell, it would be difficult to open. As the stone door fell, a few ships that were stuck under the gate broke in half. The ships' broken pieces drifted with the current. Now those sea folks won't be able to enter. A few guards stood behind the secondary gate. Just as they let out a sigh of relief, they suddenly heard a woman's pleasant singing from outside the door. "O mighty sea god, please bestow me with your divine power. Let the ignorant humans learn how to respect you." Then, there was a knock on the giant gate. The sound caused the massive door to shake non-stop. The constant knocking was like a drum beating on the guards' hearts, causing them to step back subconsciously. The knocking sound lasted for a full 10 seconds. The last second, 2 cracks suddenly appeared on the sturdy stone door. Immediately after that, the 2 cracks expanded, splitting the stone door into 2 pieces. They flew out into the distance, one of them falling into the water. It stirred waves that were more than 10 meters high. The other piece flew past the guards, smashing them into the ground and turning them into meat paste. Then, a huge wave rushed in from outside. The beautiful Poseidon stood in front, her blue hair fluttering in the wind. In the past, humans had bullied and kidnapped our clansmen. Now, it's time for our revenge. Everyone, listen up. Kill all humans in sight. Don't hold back. Earth-shaking shouts came from behind her. Kill! 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 Countless sea folks rushed into the city. A team of guards came in a boat from the water closer to the city gate. However, before they could resist, flying harpoons pierced their hearts. They widened their eyes and fell into the water, which was instantly dyed red. After killing the guards, the thousands of sea folks, led by Poseidon and Owen, rode the huge waves to the sky above the houses. The fierce sea water transformed into a giant that was dozens of meters tall. With a gentle wave of their arms, the roofs of the houses were blown away, revealing the residents hiding in them. They looked at the sky as they trembled. A trace of pity flashed in through the sea folks' eyes. However, compassion made way for hatred. They picked up their weapons and were prepared to kill those humans. Wait! At that moment, they heard a thunder-like sound. In the sky above the house that was blown away, the dripping water column was suddenly swept into the air by an invisible force. It fused and turned into Watson. "Watson, do you intend to stop us?" "Yes, friends from the sea. I know that many people in this city have done unforgivable things to you in the past. Don't worry. I will find them and get justice for you. But violence can't solve any problem, especially when the people you want to kill are innocent civilians. This will cause the conflict between the two sides to be irreconcilable. Hatred often breeds more hatred. So, please let them go. Watson spoke to Owen calmly. Owen sneered at him. This battle has already started. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to break through the floating city and avenge our kin. You want us to give up? Watson, for the sake of your kindness toward the sea folks, you can choose those you'd like to save. I will tell the sea folks to let them go. That is the best I can do for you. What if I insist that you let everyone in the city go? Then there's nothing more to say. Watson, do you think you can stop all of us? Owen spread his arms, and the thousands of sea folks behind him began to throw their weapons in all directions. Watson could stop them from attacking him, but could he stop them from attacking others? Who said that Watson's alone? Just as the sea folks were about to throw their weapons, ships appeared behind Watson and converged from various waterways. Daniel and Mike stood on those ships. Apparently, Mike had already told them about the attack in the secret chamber. Antonio was also there. Hundreds of ships had arrived. The number of people on the ships amounted to tens of thousands of people, about 10 times that of the sea folks. In just an instant, those ships had surrounded the sea folks. Everyone, listen up. Kill all the sea folks in front of you. Daniel reached out with his right hand and waved at the sea folks in front of him. All the guards on the ships drew their weapons, one after another. Their bodies were either shining with combat auras or filled with magical light. They were ready to attack the sea folks. Stop! I will get them to leave peacefully. Please don't attack them, Master Daniel. Watson's clone went to Daniel's side and shouted. As Master Antonio's disciple, you don't want me to kill those sea folks? Daniel narrowed his eyes. Yes, in the current situation, if either side makes a move, the city will be filled with rivers of blood. Furthermore, it will deepen the hatred between the two sides. The most important thing was that Watson would not be able to complete his trial. Watson, what you said makes sense. Daniel nodded. Watson was surprised when the man suddenly dropped his right hand. But I choose to refuse that. As Master Antonio's disciple, you might have learned some wonderful virtues, but you are still too young to understand the true meaning of those virtues. The so-called virtues are ultimately cruel and merciless. You have to be crueler than the enemy to make them afraid, and you must be more ruthless than the enemy so that they can't defeat you. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Countless arrows and spells landed on the sea folks. In just one wave of attacks, more than half of the sea folks were injured. Some unlucky sea folks also fell into the sea due to their severe injuries. D***MN, let's fight it out with those despicable humans. Under the leadership of Owen and Poseidon, a group of sea folks used the expanding sea water as shields and raised their weapons to fight against tens of thousands of humans. From time to time, ships would shatter, and the hull would be torn to pieces. Before the people on the boats could even fall into the water, they were torn to pieces too. However, the number of humans was greater, after all. The sea folks would have to pay a higher price to tear them apart. Even with the help of Owen and Poseidon, 2 platinum-tier elites, they still lost 1/3 of the kin in a short period. On the other hand, the humans had only lost 1/10 and a few ships. Kill all those low-class sea folks in one go. Daniel gave the order to kill all the remaining sea folks. Boom! However, before his subordinates could take action, a few ships near him exploded. Shells broke the city gate amidst the raging flames. A pearl cannon army made up of tens of thousands of sea folks entered the city. The leader, Jana, was on a giant human ship. She held Casey in her hands. Father, save me! Save me! Casey's face was covered in blood, especially his pants. The bloodstains were especially thick. Casey? Why are you in the hands of the enemy? Daniel was surprised and angry. Once again, he had underestimated his son's stupidity. Every time something happened, Casey would always appear at the wrong time and place, giving him the heaviest blow. The sea tribes had repeatedly invaded the floating city. As the head of the Ptolemy family, he had to fight them, even if he did not want to do that. It had something to do with their family's dignity and right to rule the city. If they avoided the fight, the people might think that the Ptolemy family was powerless to keep them safe, and they were not worthy of being the master of the city. However, he could not just let Casey be. He was his son. If he gave up on his son, people would think him a cold and heartless man. At that moment, Daniel was more willing to see Casey's body. It was better than seeing his idiotic son alive. Master Daniel, this is our first meeting. Since your son is in our hands, I want you to surrender and lay down the weapons in your hands. Otherwise, perhaps I won't kill your son, but I don't know what I'll do to him. Jana threatened Daniel with a raised tentacle that had a thick and long silver needle. She stabbed Casey's body with it, causing Casey to scream in pain. It hurts so much. Father, agree to her request. Retreat. Daniel had no choice but to wave his hands and order his subordinates to retreat. After his subordinates retreated a certain distance, the sea folks began to fill their pearl cannons. The cannonballs blasted outward and smashed dozens of the Ptolemy family's ships into pieces. Hundreds of men struggled in the sea and were killed by sea folks with harpoons. The number of survivors gradually decreased. Master Antonio, please save my son. Daniel had no choice but to ask Antonio for help. I can't watch this farce any longer. Let's end it as soon as possible. Antonio sighed and extended his right hand toward Jana. She immediately froze. Then, Casey floated toward Daniel's ship until he landed in it. During that process, Jana could not move at all. She only regained her mobility after Casey reached Daniel's ship. She looked at Antonio in disbelief. What happened? She was a platinum tier elite. The man had waved one time and rendered her immobile. He must be very powerful. Everyone, listen up. Now that they have nothing that can threaten us, we have nothing to lose. Kill those sea folks without mercy. Attention, my fellow sea tribesmen. There is a mysterious platinum tier elite in the opponent's camp. Be careful to avoid him and look for an opportunity to snatch Casey. Both sides were deploying tactics against each other. Watson could not stand it any longer. They had been exchanging blows for half a day. If they had fought to their death, he would have been okay with it. However, those two camps took turns to fight. Was it a turn-based battle? Watson shouted, I'll repeat it, everyone, stop. His voice was like rolling thunder, echoing on the surface of the water. Chapter 362, Turning the Tide. There is no need for you to say anything, Watson. Those people harmed my son and slaughtered residents of the floating city. I will never forgive them. I am not going to let them leave today. Daniel waved at Watson. He lowered his head and looked at Casey, who was lying on the boat, dying. His body was bloodied. Daniel's expression got colder. We won't retreat either. Watson, thank you for your kindness, but we've come here and lost many of our fellow sea folks. At the very least, we must avenge them, and we won't allow ourselves to retreat. Owen was adamant. Are you sure? You are not going to quit fighting no matter what I do? There is no way to win this battle, no matter what you do. Both sides gave the same answer when confronted with Watson's inquiry. Since you're all so determined, then I won't be courteous with you. Watson's clones appeared all at once as he took a deep breath. When the sea folk's grip over the current collapsed, water droplets in the air morphed into Watson's clones. His body grew enormously as the clones merged. The sea folks regulated the flow of water and drained the humans' ships. Watson's body drew thick and lengthy water pillars in the sky, enlarging them. Boom! Watson's body quickly grew to a height of several hundred meters and then plateaued. Everyone stared at that scene in a daze, forgetting to breathe. Suddenly, a violent noise came from the floating city, and it suddenly rose upward. Everyone snapped back to their senses. At that time, Watson's clone had already grown to several thousand meters tall, like a towering mountain that reached into the clouds. At the same time, Watson stretched both hands and dragged the floating city to the ground, lifting the entire floating city. There was no longer a drop of water in the floating city. The sea folks were flopping on the dry land. Meanwhile, the human ships were also stuck on the same dry riverbed, making it difficult for them to move forward. More than half of Lake Priest's water had vanished, too, along with the floating city. Watson's body was covered in water elements, giving him the appearance of a god. His eyes were like the sun and moon in the sky, shining on the people in the city. His voice was like thousands of thunderbolts roaring at the same time, deafening. That is the last time I ask, do you still want to fight? If you still want to fight, I will send the floating city to the border, a desolate area of human habitation. You can fight to your heart's content there. Daniel hesitated. Watson held the floating city like a child holding a huge toy. He did not know when the toy would fall to the ground and shatter. That city was made possible by his toil and sacrifice. He could not tolerate the city's destruction in comparison to the sea folks' extinction. He did not do it because he feared Watson would send them to the border. Even the sea folks paused. Watson, who had become a water elemental giant, stood in front of Owen and Poseidon. Long periods of silence followed their inability to communicate. Poseidon was their queen, but she could only access the sea god's phantom, which towered over hundreds of meters high. However, Watson's transformation was 10 times bigger. They were afraid to speak because they knew that Watson would stomp on them with his foot if they did. They had thought that Watson was a platinum tier elite, but they realized that they were wrong. Watson's strength had already far exceeded that of a platinum tier elite. He was probably a diamond tier elite. The rest of them were like flies easily squashed to death. Watson, a gigantic water elemental giant, knew he had intimidated everyone. You have an hour to clean up the battlefield before I come back for you. I would like to see the Ptolemy family withdraw their forces and the sea folk return to the sea in the next hour. Watson, the sea folks have attacked the floating city twice. Even if we let them off this time, they might return in the future. As the master of this city, I want to protect the lives of the people here. Watson, unless you have a way to stop those sea folks from attacking the city, even if I agree to your request now, I will continue to send people to strike them. Daniel raised his head and said with a serious expression. Even though Watson, who had transformed into a giant, gave off a strong sense of oppression and looked very scary, Daniel was not afraid. He could not give up on protecting the dignity and authority of the Ptolemy family. Daniel was unafraid even though Watson, who had grown into a behemoth, exuded oppression and appeared terrifying. He could not give up on preserving the Ptolemy family's honor and power. That is simple. From now on, the Sea Tribe will sign a contract with me and become my subordinates. In other words, they will belong to me. That way, you will have no reason to attack them. Watson's giant form said in a muffled voice that reverberated through the entire sky. When Daniel heard his idea, his expression changed. The nobleman's private property was considered sacrosanct and inviolable in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. It would be impossible for him to attack the Sea Tribe if they became his property. It was also impossible for him to continue enslaving sea folks. He would be breaking the law if he did so. Regardless of his family's position, he would still face harsh punishment. Would the sea folks agree with Watson's words and become his subordinate? Watson, you want to make us your slaves? What's the difference between that and the other noblemen in the city? Do you think you can do it? Owen raised his head and shouted at Watson's clone. Of course, I can do it. Watson lowered his head and blew at the floating city. The city immediately stirred a storm. The houses were blown into chaos. The sea folks near the houses were blown into the air and fell heavily. They were like fish that had run aground, grimacing in pain. I can enslave you, and I can make you do that willingly. Watson's words shook the entire city. Many people in the floating city looked up and imprinted Watson's appearance in their minds. That day was destined to be unforgettable. The whole city was lifted like a toy. They would probably never experience such a thing again in their lives. The sea folks felt even more oppressed. Watson had displayed his strength, and many of the sea folks would not be able to withstand a single strike. If Watson were serious, only 5 of them could escape the attack. Owen and Poseidon looked at each other with some hesitation. They had fought so hard to get there, but Watson wanted to enslave them, even if they could live a better life than other ordinary slaves under Watson. Freedom and life, which was more precious? Watson, you claimed you could enslave us voluntarily. I would like to know what you have in mind. Are you going to provide us with a lot of advantages? Owen's eyes flickered. If Watson gave them a lot of things, such as building 180 palaces similar to the 12 palaces of gold, he might be able to persuade the sea folk to agree to Watson's request. No, I don't plan to give you any benefits. I have another way. By the way, it's too tiring to keep lowering my head to talk to you. I'd better change to my main body to talk to you. As soon as his voice fell, another Watson suddenly appeared in the sky above a secret chamber in the city. He quickly teleported in front of everyone. That was the real Watson. Since there was no water in the floating city, he did not need to continue powering the underwater network in the secret chamber. Everyone was stunned when they saw Watson standing before them and the water elemental monster hovering over them. They were under the impression that Watson was the giant who had appeared and was conversing with them. They had no idea that Watson's clone was speaking in place of the real person. If a clone could be that potent, how much more powerful was Watson in his original form? The sea folks, who were ready to reject Watson, were swayed. Of course, it was Watson's next move that had them on edge. My honorable master, fortunately, I have not failed you. I have already captured Miss Elvin. Elvin had wanted to take advantage of the chaos in the city to leave. Fortunately, you had successfully drained the water in the city, preventing her from fleeing. However, I was not able to get a good look at the individual who was trailing her. Then, Mr. K snatched a chained woman from behind and marched in front of her. That woman was the owner of the Iris Flower Tavern. No one in the room said anything when Mr. K arrived. Daniel and Mike were the only ones who were startled when Mike yelled out, "Father, it is him." He was the one who instigated the attack on the vault. That individual is Watson's subordinate, which surprised me. Watson, is that so? You sent someone to attack the secret chamber where we kept the sea god's trident? Of course not. Watson explained, Mr. K is a staff at the Iris Flower Tavern's auction house. He was also Miss Elvin's subordinate. The attack on us was Miss Elvin's plan. Unfortunately, I've gained control over her subordinate. As for the sea god's trident, we'll know where it is after we ask Miss Elvin. Oh, right, I almost forgot to mention that she was the one who started the conflict between the sea folks and the Ptolemy family. Her goal was to let both of you suffer heavy losses so that the Severed Fingers gang can take over that city. Elvin, was that the truth? Daniel looked at Elvin with a solemn expression. Elvin burst out laughing in front of everyone. Even though her smile was lovely, it was tinged with mocking contempt. Does that make a difference? Anyway, now that I have been discovered, I will do what you command. You won't believe me if I tell you that the youngster did it. Do you think it is true? Yes, they believed her. Many in attendance could not stop nodding. Before they saw Watson's genuine strength and learned what that young man had done by claiming to be Casey, they might not have thought that the young man was both powerful and intelligent. Although he could not threaten the gang leader, it was not impossible for him to do so. Elvin's arrogant face changed to one of amusement as she cast a glance toward Watson. Watson was unmoved by that. He merely gestured at Kay with his chin. Go and summon all the members from the Severed Fingers gang here. The leader had been captured, so Mr. K quickly brought the gang's dazed members to Watson, including Glenn. Kay, are those all the Severed Fingers gang members? Yes, master. Those people are all from the gang. Have any of them ever harmed others or done any bad things that violated the kingdom's laws? None of them did that. All the Severed Fingers gang members have committed heinous crimes. After all, the first rule to join the gang was to cut off one's pinky. There is a proverb in the kingdom called the thumb is connected to the heart. Cutting off one's finger is equivalent to cutting off one's heart. Many of those people can even kill their parents and family members without hesitation. I'm relieved. Watson was delighted with K.'s answer and nodded expressionlessly. Hey, brat! Why did you capture all my subordinates? Are you going to kill them in front of me, or put on a cruel act of torturing them in front of me, hoping to get something out of me? When Elvin saw her subordinates, the disdain in her heart got even stronger. She was one of the Severed Fingers gang leaders, and she was also the king's assassin. As a professional killer, she had undergone strict training since she was young. No matter what methods Watson used, including mental magic, they would not be able to extract anything from her. On the contrary, she might pretend to submit and intentionally reveal some false information to Watson. I don't know if that method counts as killing them, but I won't torture any of you. You will tell me the information yourself. Watson extended his right hand toward the members of the Severed Finger Gang. Some Severed Finger Gang members stiffened their necks and showed an uncompromising attitude, while others kept their mouths shut and looked uncooperative. Apparently, no one thought that they would confess in front of Watson. Everyone there was confused. Watson had just told the sea folks that they would have to submit themselves voluntarily. Perhaps it had something to do with Watson's actions, but they could not understand what Watson had planned. Just as everyone was confused, Watson chanted, "System fusion, activate." The faces of the stubborn or recalcitrant members shifted in response to Watson's voice. Their bodies morphed into beams of light that converged in midair to form a human silhouette. What kind of magic is that? No, that is sorcery. A Severed Finger Gang member, he must have seen his companions turned into rays of light. He was still wondering what kind of magic that was, but he suddenly realized that his companion, who had turned into beams of light, had fused with the rays of light from the others and turned into a humanoid. He looked fearful. No, no, I'll say it. I'm willing to tell everyone what I know. Don't kill me. Arg. As time went on, more people began to suspect something was amiss. To save their lives, they bowed their heads and asked for forgiveness. In any case, Watson paid little attention to them and just fused them. In just a few seconds, their bodies had been fused. All the Severed Fingers gang members were fused into one person, including Kay and Glenn. That is the fusion magic you have mastered. You can fuse items, and you can fuse people too. You know, if you... Even Elvin was shocked when she saw the scene before her. She had deduced that Watson might have mastered the ability to fuse items and raise their quality. However, she had not expected that Watson's ability could be used on other living things. She was about to experience the effect of that ability. As the saying went, the unknown was the most terrifying. As a professional assassin, she had looked down on him from the start. She was confident that nothing could force her into submission. At that moment, her expression suddenly changed, and she forced a smile at Watson. "Watson, I was wrong. We can sit down and talk about it slowly. Don't worry. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. I'm sorry, it's too late." Watson's expression was cold as he clenched his outstretched hand tightly. The light formed covered Elvin's body, wrapping her and turning her into a huge silkworm chrysalis. Soon, the silkworm chrysalis ruptured, revealing a woman inside. That woman looked like an elf. Her delicate face looked like a teenage girl or a mature woman in her 20s. She was both mature and pure. Compared to elves in the past, that woman was a little taller. White bones emerged from her back, forming two huge white wings. With a gentle flap, she had created a storm. Congratulations, Master! You have successfully fused a Diamond Tier Servant. Diamond Tier Servant, Elven. Abilities: White Bone Manipulation. The bones in your body can multiply endlessly, turning into Platinum Tier bone spikes to attack your enemies. Blood Manipulation. You can control the blood in your body to turn it into a weapon to fight your enemies, and you can also boil the blood in your enemies' bodies to cause Platinum Tier damage. Zombie Summoning. You can turn the dead into zombies and summon them. Those who are bitten by zombies will turn into zombies. And Complete Control, a Diamond Tier spell, where you can control your enemies to become your companions. Additional abilities: Pain Loss. Due to the cruel training from a young age, you might lose some pained nerves. Erudite, gain knowledge when needed, and pain loss. Watson remained calm and beckoned the woman with his finger. Elven immediately came in front of him and knelt on one knee respectfully. My honorable master, what can I do for you? From now on, the Severed Fingers Gang is yours. I want you to turn the Severed Finger Gang into a proper business. Chapter 363, Advancing to Diamond Tier. Yes, Master. Don't worry. I'll do it in a moment. After giving the order to Elven, Watson turned his head and looked around. Everyone who saw him felt a chill run down their spines. Watson had fused all the members of the Severed Fingers Gang, including their leader, in an instant. They had become one person, and that person seemed to be under Watson's control. He was respectful to him. That scene was too terrifying. The Severed Fingers Gang had tens of thousands of people, and the way those people disappeared in an instant was very frightening. Watson said that he wanted them to submit willingly, and he even wanted them to see that scene. They had not understood Watson's thoughts, but they did after that. Tens of thousands of people with severed fingers could be destroyed by Watson in an instant. The Sea tribe or the Ptolemy family did not have much more than the gang. If Watson wanted to, he could also turn them into puppets. That kind of ending was even scarier than death. The matter with the Severed Fingers Gang has been settled. Next is the matter of the Sea tribe and the Ptolemy family. I don't know if you two. Watson turned his head and looked around. His gaze was on the leader of the Sea folks and Daniel. However, before he could finish his words, Owen and Poseidon, the Sea folks' leaders, fell to their knees with a plop. Watson, the Sea folks are willing to submit to you. From now on, the Sea folks are your property. Watson nodded. He turned his head again and looked in the direction of Daniel. Retreat, quickly fish the boats out of the waterway. What a bunch of idiots. Can't you see that there's no water in those waterways? You don't even know how to fish the boats out. What if the boats are damaged? It seemed that they were not there to fight but to sightsee. Daniel berated his men for fishing out the boats one by one. He no longer considered the Sea folks to be anything. What a joke! If Watson continued to bite down on them, the Ptolemy family would probably be the next to disappear from the city. Perhaps that floating city would change its name and become Watson City. Outside the floating city, not far from the shore of Lake Priest, a small boat floated by. A man in black was on it. He was watching with a complicated gaze as the floating city was destroyed by a water elemental giant that was thousands of meters tall. The water elemental giant gradually turned into a surging stream of water and disappeared into the floating city and lake. The water elemental giant that was thousands of meters tall had disappeared too quickly as a dark cloud appeared in the sky. It did not disperse. The drizzle fell with the mist, wetting the man's clothes. Elven, she must have prepared a good wine for me. I think she would have gotten along with me. What a pity. He took out a bottle of red wine from the trunk at the stern, opened the bottle cap, and drank 2 mouthfuls. The man leisurely left in the direction of the royal city. That Watson is really a monster. Even though I did not tell Elven the complete information, he transformed into a thousands of meter tall giant and uprooted an entire city. Can an ordinary platinum tier elite do such a thing? After returning to the royal city, I hope that His Majesty will not assign me any tasks relating to Watson. I want to live for a while longer. The faint sigh dissipated in the air. The man in the small boat left the gate and gradually disappeared into the city. Not long after the man left, another group of people walked out of the floating city. Owen and Poseidon led those people. They surrounded a young man, who was a member of the Sea Folks. "Young Master Watson, the Sea Folks are willing to become your property. I wonder when we can sign the contract." Owen approached Watson carefully. He did not dare to be careless because he was afraid that Watson would merge him into someone else's body if he angered Watson, making him no longer himself. At the same time, Owen secretly rejoiced in his heart. He was glad that Watson had a good temper. Previously, when he went against Watson, Watson did not merge him. "When we go to the bottom of the sea, and you gather all the Sea Folks, we will sign the contract then." Watson glanced at Owen. On the surface, he looked serious, but on the inside, he thought it was funny. Owen, who had previously ridiculed him, had turned cowardly. Master Antonio was right. As long as one had the power to say something, they would become powerful and be able to convince others to follow it. Watson understood the benefits of power, but he did not intend to make it his only power. The bond between the shackles of power was frail, and it might snap one day. After making up his mind, a huge teleportation array appeared under Watson's feet and brought him and many other Sea Folks into the Sea Folks' territory. Watson stayed there for an entire week. During that week, Watson helped the Sea Folks to make adjustments between Atlantis and the surrounding waters. Atlantis was 100 times larger than before, and the original underwater city had become an existence similar to the central city. The surroundings were scattered with different palaces, led by the 12 golden palaces, scattered in an orderly manner. In addition to the expansion, the armor worn by the Sea Folks had also been upgraded. Those were originally polished from the ores at the bottom of the sea, and some did not wear armor at all. They wore undergarments that were simply polished seashells to cover their essential parts. After all, the Sea Folks' living environment meant that they did not know how to make a fire. They also did not know how to use fire for forging. However, with Watson's help, all of those had changed. Watson first used the system fusion to upgrade a portion of the Sea Folks' armor to gold tier. Then, he summoned the World Transformation Mirror and opened the passage to Mount Creation. A bunch of useless platinum tier armor and weapons were transported from there. When those weapons and armor were first transported over, the entire sea crew was in an uproar. When the Sea Folks learned that those weapons were all produced by Watson, and those weapons were considered ordinary on Mount Creation, their feelings toward Watson also changed. Watson had helped them a lot, and they were grateful for that. Later, because of Watson's fusion ability, they were in awe. Their feelings toward Watson had turned into respect, just like their respect for their sea god. If a person were the same strength as them, they might have many other opinions of that man. However, if that person's strength surpassed theirs by too much, they would not dare to have any other emotions other than respect toward that person. That day, on the 7th day of Watson's arrival at the bottom of the Sea Folks were holding a grand event. The direction of the sculpture is a little off. Go back a little more. Use more strength. That is young Master Watson's sculpture. Any collision would be disrespectful to him. The original altar in the huge abyss had been removed and replaced by a platinum-colored sculpture that was thousands of meters tall. Tens of thousands of Sea Folks pulled it with ropes and other things, and it was slowly moved into the abyss. Soon, the sculpture was set up in the abyss. The huge sculpture filled up the abyss and turned into a tower that was taller than the entire kingdom. That sculpture could be seen by anyone who lives near the sea. Young Master Watson, I wonder if you are satisfied with the placement of that sculpture. Owen did not help to place the sculpture. Instead, he was floating in the ocean with Watson on top of a palace in the distance, asking with a flattering expression. Owen's attitude had changed from the one he adopted a few days ago. He was wearing a set of platinum tier armor. That armor was specially designed for mermaids. Even though the fishtail was covered with a layer of platinum tier scales, the weapon in Owen's hand had also become a platinum tier harpoon. 7 days ago, they had only agreed to become Watson's subordinate out of fear, but they had pledged loyalty toward Watson from the bottom of their hearts. If they were to submit to Watson, they would receive free platinum tier items. Even their living environment would be brand new. Furthermore, they could use the tunnel constructed by the World Transformation Mirror to go to Mount Creation at any time to purchase goods produced by the humans. That was a heavenly kingdom for Owen. After all, his biggest dream was to destroy the floating city and capture a group of human craftsmen to work for him. However, how could the craftsmen from the floating city compare to those from Mount Creation? Not bad, but isn't the abyss a sacred place that you usually use to worship the sea god? Isn't placing my sculpture there disrespectful to the sea god? It doesn't matter. That place is a sacred place for worship because the abyss once stored the sea god's trident. However, that weapon was lost a long time ago. We've sent people to inquire about it and found out that it was fake. Perhaps it was because we lost the weapon that the sea god stopped protecting us long ago. Otherwise, we would not have been captured by so many humans. Seeing Watson's worry, Owen waved his hand and said indifferently. The sea god no longer protected them. Even if the sea god protected them, it would also delay their faith in Watson. After all, Watson could give them a rich life and powerful platinum tier resources. Even a god might not be able to do that. Young Master Watson, your sculpture has been built. Next is your coronation ceremony. Please, come on stage. Poseidon, who was in a silk dress, walked over slowly and made a gesture of invitation toward Watson. Poseidon's long dress kept fluttering under the water, she looked very beautiful. Obviously, that long dress was created by a human. Watson nodded and followed behind Poseidon and came to the sky above the newly built statue. As he stood on the head of the statue, he looked down and saw that most of the sea folks were gathered in front of him, looking at him with keen eyes. Next, we will hold the coronation ceremony for young Master Watson. He has requested that the sea folks become his subordinates and listen to his orders. However, young Master Watson is not satisfied with the traditional way of signing a slave contract. Therefore, after discussing it, we have decided to turn young Master Watson into the object of our faith and let him become the second god to protect our race on par with the sea god. Poseidon's voice was transmitted via magic so that all the sea folks could hear her clearly. In the past, the sea folks were bullied because we weren't strong enough. Now, we have weapons that can protect us. In the past, we stayed in the sea because we were lost. Now, our God has pointed the direction for us. We are willing to offer our faith to young Master Watson, just like how we used to believe in the sea god. We are willing to offer our faith to young Master Watson. Tens of thousands of sea folks knelt and worshipped him. They looked at him with sparkling eyes and shouted in unison. It might sound incredible to ask the sea tribe that hated humans to worship a human and treat him as the object of their faith. However, to the sea tribe, that was very normal. Why would they have to ask that? Then, a huge mirror appeared. Rings of light rippled around the mirror, and before it opened, a large number of shiny feathers floated down, turning the sea into a sacred kingdom. As the feathers floated downward, the low moans of the gods gradually sounded in the air. Angels with white wings on their backs and halos above their heads instantly descended into the water. At the forefront of those angels was an army of 100,000 people dressed in black armor. Every one of them emitted a platinum tier aura. Behind those 100,000 angels were millions of ordinary angels that could not pass through the World Transformation Mirror. They could only worship Watson from Mount Creation. Praise young Master Watson, just as you would praise the sun. The 100,000 angels above their heads shouted in thunderous voices. Many of the sea folks immediately felt immense pressure, and at the same time, a trace of pride appeared on their faces. If the sea folks were the kings of the sea, then the angels were the overlords of the sky. As a mysterious and powerful ancient race, they all recognized Watson as their master. As for the sea folks, they were no more than angels. Those days, when Watson was helping to transform Atlantis, he also mentioned Mount Creation and the Tower of Babel that he had created. He was planning to build a third miracle in Atlantis. It would be called the Dragon Palace. The Dragon Palace would be based on Atlantis and spread throughout the entire ocean. As long as there was seawater, there would be traces of the Dragon Palace. It was a huge project to control the resources at the bottom of the sea. Watson worked for a full 7 days before he came up with a framework. He decided to complete the rest of the work when he cooperated with the Sea Folks. Accepting the Sea Folks as an affiliated race was not only because of the trial that Antonio mentioned but also because Watson needed their help to plant the seeds to overthrow the kingdom's monarch in the future. What he needed was the first step of his plan. Watson's aura suddenly thickened under the worship of millions of angels and tens of thousands of sea folks. That power of faith was so powerful that it was like a sun appearing in the sea, enveloping Watson within it. It illuminated all directions. At the same time, after absorbing that power of faith, the source of chaotic elemental magic in Watson's soul suddenly increased in size. He broke through from the diamond tier into an unknown domain. It was the domain of the gods. Watson felt his mind explode. The source of chaotic elemental magic changed from the shape of a fountain to the shape of a kingdom. Many figures appeared in the kingdom. Those figures included the sea folks and the residents of Mount Creation. The soul projections of those who had dedicated their faith to Watson appeared there. Their bodies were bathed in the violent aura of chaos. The kingdom that the source of chaotic elemental magic had turned into was not an ordinary mortal kingdom but a divine kingdom. At that moment, the capacity of the source of chaotic elemental magic had officially changed to the starlight tier. Its capacity had expanded by hundreds or thousands of times, and the people there felt it. I feel as if a brand new energy has been injected into my body. What kind of power is that? A sea folk kneeling on the ground suddenly raised his right hand, and a ball of chaotic color appeared in his hand. The sea water covered by the chaotic color instantly dissipated as if it had been eliminated from that world. This power can be divided into 6 different elements. It's really amazing. The other mermaid did not show any chaotic colors on her body. Instead, there were 6 different elements: light, darkness, fire, water, and wind. The 6 colors made her look like a fairy. That strange energy must have been given to us by young Master Watson. Soon, the sea folks who sensed the chaotic elements raised their heads and looked at Watson, who was surrounded by the power of faith. Their eyes could not penetrate the dense power of faith, and they could only vaguely see Watson's figure. They looked grateful. They did not expect that they would receive such great benefits from their faith in Watson. Just the power from the chaotic elements had increased their strength by more than 10 times, not to mention that a large amount of knowledge had been transferred into their minds, allowing their strength to multiply. After feeling the benefits, they became more pious. Initially, most of their faith in Watson was due to the benefits that Watson had given them. After that, they had really regarded Watson as a god. More concentrated power of faith entered Watson's body, allowing the magical source that had just attained the starlight tier to expand once again and stabilize that level. Meanwhile, Watson, who had been stuck at peak platinum tier had also progressed. The tremendous power of faith helped him to cross the boundary between platinum and diamond tier, and thus allowing him to enter the diamond tier. Boom! The moment he entered the diamond tier, a phantom image that spanned thousands of meters appeared behind Watson. The image connected the sky and the earth, causing dark clouds to cover the sky. Thunder rumbled, and whirlpools appeared in the seawater, creating 100-meter waves. The aura that filled the sky spread, and the pressure from higher-tier beings caused the sea tribe and the angels to kneel respectfully. The world in Watson's eyes had changed at that moment. Initially, the world was bright, but after advancing to the diamond tier, the world became abstract in his eyes, like countless huge threads entangled together by lines. Those lines were the rules, and different rules interweaved to become things. Those in the diamond tier could grasp the rules. Anyone else would only see the world on the surface, but after reaching that tier, they would see the world's essence. Watson had initially grasped dozens of rules, but after advancing to the diamond tier, those rules had spontaneously fused, causing the number to increase dramatically, becoming hundreds. Hundreds of rules twisted as if they wanted to form the shadow of a kingdom in his mind. Then, Watson extended his right hand to control the rules in the seawater, to extract the. On the other hand, there was a rule called the water element. A rule called the transformation was extracted from there. The seawater contained hundreds of thousands of rules, and Watson only knew some of them. Those rules twisted and entwined in front of Watson, vaguely turning into a huge palace made of seawater. It was obviously made of seawater, but the walls of the palace had a crystal luster, and at the same time, it emitted a sacred aura. Everyone who saw that was shocked. A divine kingdom. Is that the legendary divine kingdom? Chapter 364, Going to the Royal City. Poseidon's lips trembled as he watched Watson's actions. His expression was filled with excitement and disbelief. As the Sea Folk's Empress, she was very familiar with their records. She knew that the sea god would have their own kingdom. It was called the Kingdom of God. It was where gods were invincible. No mortal could harm them. The Kingdom of God's records mentioned that they would use faith as an anchor and spells to cast barriers, use keys to open the kingdom, and send divine light down to earth. That was the same as the Kingdom of Sea that Watson created. Unfortunately, Watson's kingdom was not fully formed yet. It was not stable enough, it would gradually collapse. With Poseidon as the leader, the few sea folks who knew the Kingdom of God looked regretful, especially Owen. He felt a little guilty. What level of expertise is Watson? From the looks of it, he must have just advanced to the diamond tier. But he could grasp the divine kingdom that only the legendary gods could get. Furthermore, becoming a diamond tier at that age is too heaven-defying. Doesn't that mean he will become a starlight tier elite and become a god? Initially, Owen felt that it was strange that there were millions of angels who believed in Watson. However, at that moment, he did not think that it was weird at all. Those angels were created by Watson, but even if they were real angels, they would probably put down their dignity to protect him when they saw a young and promising youth like Watson who had the potential to become a god. It's a pity that I don't have enough rules for now. Otherwise, I would be able to build a complete divine kingdom. Watson looked at the dissipating divine kingdom in front of him with some regrets. He could feel that the divine kingdom dissipated because there were not enough rules. The power of faith was the bricks of the divine kingdom, while the rules were the foundation. No matter how many bricks there were, they would just be a piece of loose sand without a structure. I only have hundreds of rules for now. I need to master at least tens of thousands of rules to be able to build a complete divine kingdom successfully. What was Watson thinking? He was somewhat impressed with the starlight tier gods. If one wanted to enter the stars, one had to master 10,000 rules at the diamond tier. To become a diamond tier expert was already a rare genius, and those geniuses were usually lucky enough to master 2 or 3 diamond tier rules. If one wanted to master 10,000 rules in their lifetime and enter the starlight tier, one had to be a genius among geniuses. After lamenting for a while, Watson restrained the aura on his body and landed in front of the sea tribe and the angels. He waved his hand and said, "Get up." Watson was no different from an ordinary person. There was no trace of aura emitted from his body, but his every move was filled with affinity, making people subconsciously want to be close to him. Watson did not use his abilities, but the people who heard his words stood up spontaneously. They did not understand why they had to be so obedient toward Watson's words. "I have stayed here long enough. Since I have become a diamond tier elite, I shall head to the royal city next. The rest of the work will be left to you. I hope that you will not disappoint me. Please rest assured, young Master Watson. We will not disappoint you." The 100,000 angels and tens of thousands of sea creatures all responded at the same time. Their voices reverberated in the ocean, causing the seawater to swell into massive waves. Watson nodded in satisfaction. He took a step forward and disappeared from the spot. There was not a trace of energy fluctuation. It was as if he had entered through a crack in the rules. No one could even guess where he had gone after that step. That's great. When can I enter Diamond Tier? Looking at Watson's handsome figure, Owen's face was filled with envy. At that moment, someone beside him pulled his arm. He turned his head and saw that the person pulling him was Alice. She was pouting. Uncle Owen, didn't you say that you wanted to destroy the floating city and then tie up Brother Watson and put him in front of me, never to let him leave again? But Brother Watson still left. You lied to me. Alice's words made Owen's face reddened, and he felt a little ashamed. He had made such an oath before he attacked the floating city, but who knew that Watson was such a monster that could uproot the floating city with just a clone? He had successfully stopped the battle between them and the Ptolemy family. So, he had not tied up Watson and put him in front of Alice. Instead, Watson had become the object of their faith, and they had become the ones who were enslaved. Alice, I did not lie to you. Even though I did not tie Watson up and keep him here, he has now become the god who protects us. We will have many more opportunities to meet him in the future. Owen comforted her. Alice knew that what he said made sense. Her lips gradually relaxed, and her expression became gentle. Her eyes never left the place where Watson had disappeared. I wonder how long it will take for Brother Watson to go to the royal city. I really hope that he can come back soon. I can't stay idle while I wait for Brother Watson. With the brand new elements and combat techniques, I can become stronger. As long as I become stronger, I can help my brother, and I can always be by his side. Alice clenched her fists as if she had made up her mind. At that moment, Watson returned to his hotel in the floating city. The city had regained its peace. The previously damaged floating city buildings had been repaired, and the entire city looked as if nothing had happened. Honorable young Master Watson, that is the Severed Fingers Gang's property in the floating city. Those are their remaining 9 leaders. As soon as they entered the city, Elvin walked out from the street corner and handed Watson a thick stack of documents. At the end of the papers were portraits of 9 men, women, and children of different ages. Next to them was some basic information such as names, home addresses, and so on. You've helped me a lot, Elvin. Master, you flatter me. As your humble servant, that is what I should do. Elvin bowed respectfully to Watson, her tone fearful. Next, I'll have to trouble you to continue staying in the floating city and help supervise the Ptolemy family. At the same time, you can keep an eye on the sea folks to prevent further conflicts between the two sides. After memorizing the information of the 9 leaders, Watson rubbed his fingers. The portraits burned into ashes, and the remaining ones were handed back to Elvin. Please rest assured, Master. I will make a big change in those industries and strive to earn a lot of money. You don't have to earn much. Just be consistent. Watson gave a few instructions to Elvin. He looked up and saw that Nightingale and Denise had packed up large and small packages outside the hotel. They put them on the carriage pulled by the heaven-devouring Rat King and helped Antonio onto the carriage. During that time, Nightingale came to the front of the carriage with the reins in her hands. She turned her head and waved at Watson. Young Master Watson, we should go. Coming. Watson turned around and entered the carriage. Before getting into the carriage, Nightingale watched as Elvin, wearing a hood and hiding her face in the shadows, left with a puzzled look. Watson, who is that? She's one of my subordinates in the city. After all, I've gained a lot here. It would be a pity if I didn't find someone to manage it, Watson replied ambiguously. Nightingale did not ask further, she drove the carriage out of the city. After more than a week, Watson finally left the floating city. When he was there, the city was surging with undercurrents. At that moment, everything was gone. It seemed that the river under the bridge had become much clearer. At the Ptolemy's family. Master Daniel, are you really not planning to return the slaves we lost in the Crystal Palace to us? Now that the Severed Fingers gang has been destroyed, the Ptolemy family has become the rulers of the floating city. However what? Daniel's eyes flashed as he asked about the request made by the head of another family in front of him. It's nothing. I don't need the Ptolemy family to compensate me for those slaves at 50 times the original price. I only need compensation at the original price. Can the Ptolemy family do that? Master Daniel, think about it carefully. I won't disturb you for now. The head of the noble family also had a lot of assets in the floating city. At that moment, he patted Daniel's shoulder, adjusted his clothes, and left with a smile. Daniel was left sitting on the sofa. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. However, he quickly threw the teacup on the ground, revealing an uncertain expression. Compensation for the slaves? There were tens of thousands of slaves who had disappeared. According to the cost of one slave, it was the price of tens of millions of gold coins. How could the Ptolemy family afford it? D*MN. Do those people think that the Severed Fingers gang's resources will belong to the Ptolemy family just because they're gone? Even though the Severed Fingers were gone, Elvin was still there. She even ascended to Diamond Tier. Even if Daniel wanted to kill her and seize her properties, he would not be able to do so, and the Sea Tribe would not be able to touch her either. He had heard that the Sea Tribe had obtained many benefits after becoming Watson's subordinates. The key was Watson's strength. If he were to touch the Sea Tribe, it would be equivalent to offending Watson. He was courting death. Having lost the channel to buy and sell slaves from the Sea Tribe, the Ptolemy family did not become stronger. Instead, they became weaker. Master Daniel, something terrible has happened. At that moment, a man dressed like a butler rushed in from outside. He knelt on the ground with a terrified expression, and his handlebar mustache trembled as he spoke. What happened? Did the rich and nobles in the city set up a trick to prevent our family from suppressing them, controlling the prices of goods in secret, and suppressing our family's goods? No. Then did the Sea Tribes do something strange? Not really. Did something happen in the secret chamber where the Sea God's trident was stored, and someone had taken it? No. The man could see that Daniel had been troubled by too many things. Daniel did not need to continue guessing. The butler swallowed his saliva and said, "It's something related to young Master Casey." Casey? Him again? What's wrong with him? I've already sent the best doctor in the city to treat him. Although his subordinates can't fully recover, they can still recover some of their abilities. After doing so many stupid things, it's already not bad to have such an outcome. What mistake did he make again? Did he harm another woman in the city again? At the mention of Casey, Daniel was furious. Young Master Casey did not go out. This time, it's not young Master Casey who started anything. Someone heard that young Master Casey saved the floating city and came here to challenge him. After the butler finished speaking, Daniel frowned. Are you sure that someone wants to challenge him? Yes. Just as the butler finished speaking, there was a commotion outside the door. Two strong men in armor were pushing and shoving the guards as they rushed into the courtyard. They shouted at the top of their lungs. I heard that young Master Casey was previously slandered as a good-for-nothing. When the floating city was in danger, and young Master Casey was the first to step out and save everyone. He even fought against a platinum tier sea folk for 300 rounds. We admire his courage. I am a swordsman from the capital. I hope that young Master Casey can fight with me. You're right. I also admire young Master Casey very much. As a hero, I believe that young Master Casey will not reject our request, right? His companion spoke as well. It was not uncommon for the two of them to challenge the famous heroes of the kingdom as wandering swordsmen. After all, it was difficult for wandering swordsmen even to eat before they became famous. The best way for them to become famous was to challenge the strong. If they were lucky enough to win, they would make a huge profit. Even if they could not win, they would still have the ability to boast about it no matter where they went in the future, like how they had fought with that person or how they had lasted 300 rounds with another person, and so on. Casey had saved the floating city and displayed platinum tier strength. He was undoubtedly an excellent target. As for Watson, who had also made a name for himself in the floating city, he would not in their consideration. The reason was simple. Casey had saved the city to obtain glory. Watson had previously elevated the city to intimidate the Ptolemy family and the sea folks, leaving a bad impression in the hearts of the residents. Young Master Casey, what's wrong? Why are you ignoring us? Are you afraid? If that's the case, we can announce to the public that young Master Casey is afraid of us and that we have won without a fight. The two vagrant swordsmen wanted to continue shouting, but they were held up by a few guards who could not bear to watch any longer and were ruthlessly thrown out. Not long after that, the door to the living room was pushed open. Casey limped in with a cane and walked in with a face full of grievances. "Father, I can't take it anymore. I can't stay in this city any longer. A week ago, the Sea Tribe's platinum tier warrior, Jana, had crushed his private parts. He should have recovered after a week of recovery, but it turned out to be the exact opposite. During that week, many wandering warriors wanted to challenge him because they wanted to be famous. In the end, his injuries did not heal, and instead, he was beaten even more miserably by those people. Casey did not fight or even scold them back. He hoped those people would wake up and realize that he was not the one who had saved the city, so they would not beat him up. However, a rumor circulating in the city had shocked him. The reason young Master Casey did not make a move was that those people were not worthy of him. The only thing that could make young Master Casey make a move was when the city was in crisis. He was a real hero. Some residents glorified him, saying that he did not make a move because he was not afraid but because he did not want to hurt those ignorant challengers. Those rumors caused many challengers to leave, but they were interested again. Many people passionately discussed the lucky person that allowed Casey to break the first rule and take action. When he saw his son's face full of new and old injuries, Daniel's heart ached a little, but he asked without showing any emotion, "If you don't want to be here, where can you go? If you're here, you still have the protection of the Ptolemy family, so others won't beat you up too badly. If you go to other cities, I won't be able to protect you." Casey also revealed a troubled expression. That was right. If he were not in the floating city, where could he go? Just as he was in a dilemma, Lana, who was wearing a sun hat and carrying a large box, walked into the living room. "Greetings, Father. If second brother is worried, why don't he come with me? I'm preparing to go to the royal city to attend the Royal Academy's enrollment ceremony. If he comes with me, he can also take care of me. I heard that the Royal Academy is a closed academy, so outsiders can't enter at all. Furthermore, there are elites from all over the kingdom. Their achievements are not inferior to second brother. There shouldn't be anyone who wants to challenge him there." "Yes, why didn't I think of that? Father, I want to go to the royal city with sister, but I don't want to go to school. I just want you to find me a place to live in the academy." Casey's eyes lit up. Daniel's mouth trembled with anger. "Find you a place to live? Do you think I'm on the Royal Academy? With your behavior, it would be difficult for you to pass their entrance examination. I've decided that you will go to the royal city with Lana to take the entrance examination. On the way, let Lana tutor you. If you can't get into the Royal Academy, then find a place to bury yourself. The Ptolemy family doesn't need a good-for-nothing like you who only knows how to destroy things. Why are you doing this?" Casey's face was filled with disappointment. He had wanted to go to the royal city to avoid the elites who had gone to the floating city because of him. He wanted to enjoy himself there. However, it seemed like his father wanted him to suffer. That was his father's decision, and he could not refuse. Second brother, if you are ready, go pack your things. The carriage is already outside, Lana urged. Her gaze looked through the window and saw a very distant place. Watson, will you be surprised to see me in the capital? You've only been here for a few days, but you've already turned the floating city upside down. That proves that you're an interesting person. I hope you can maintain that personality when you're in the capital. Don't make me feel bored. Chapter 365, The First Meeting. Watson, how many points do you think you can get for the 2 trials that your master arranged for you in the floating city? They were in a carriage heading toward the royal city. Antonio leaned back in his chair and asked that question lazily. I think I can get 60 points, Watson said hesitantly. Why do you think so? Antonio asked. It had been a few days since they left the floating city, and the carriage had already arrived near the royal city. Not far ahead, they could already see the landmark buildings of the royal city, the 9 massive walls that were gradually rising. Because I did not stop the sea folks and the Ptolemy family before they started the war. I should have had a better way. For example, I should have displayed my ability before the sea folks wanted to resist. For instance, I could have helped them rebuild the underwater city or brought them to Mount Creation. That way, they would not have gone to the floating city. I did not do my best in the Ptolemy family's trials either. If I could comprehend the principles that you wanted to impart to me faster, I would not have been ambushed by the Severed Fingers gang, causing me to have no choice but to destroy them in front of everyone. Watson counted with his fingers, adding things he did not do well in the floating city. Antonio waved his hand. All right, Watson, it's enough that you know that you still have some shortcomings. If you have any shortcomings, you have to correct them. Next time, just strive to do better. Yes, Master. I promise to do better next time. Antonio heard Watson's respectful promise and mocked him inwardly. Every time Watson agreed to that kind of thing, he would agree very quickly. He did not think that Watson would only get 60 points. In fact, when he gave Watson the first trial, he did not expect that Watson would understand the subtle manipulation of power in only a day. He even wanted to discuss with the Ptolemy family about letting Watson stay in the secret chamber for a few more days. He did not expect Watson to easily complete the first trial and stop the battle between Ptolemy and the Sea tribes. Antonio could not even stop the fight between the 2 races by himself. Plus, Watson had even advanced to the diamond tier. After advancing to the diamond tier, Watson did not exude the aura of an elite. However, Antonio knew that Watson's strength far surpassed his. Perhaps the Sword Saint was the only one who could take on Watson then. At the same time, he smelled the aura of faith on Watson. Antonio, who had entered the diamond tier, naturally knew what that aura was. On the way, Antonio asked Watson about the process of advancing to the diamond tier. Watson said that he had used the faith of the Sea tribe and the people of Mount Creation to break through forcefully. That made Antonio very envious. If one wanted to become a star, one had to have people who believed in themselves. Many people in the kingdom worshipped the astrologer, but there was still a specific difference between worship and faith. Furthermore, those people were not as high quality as the millions of believers Watson had. They were all platinum tier angels. Watson's strength had surpassed him. That made Antonio, as his master, felt somewhat frustrated. He considered whether he should discuss it with Watson and ask his disciple to give him a portion of the believers. In the end, before he could speak, the carriage vibrated. This is a checkpoint, please get off the carriage. Let us check your permits. There was a 100-meter tall wall blocking the front of the carriage. 2 rows of soldiers in golden armor stood in front of it. Their bodies emitted a gold tier aura as they extended their hands toward the carriage. Ordinary gold tier elites were overlords in some cities. They were either the guards of some great nobles who guarded their homes or their courtyards. However, those gold-tier warriors could only defend the city gates. It has been a few years since I left the capital, including the time I spent on Mount Creation. It feels like a lifetime ago. Antonio walked down with a wooden cane. He sighed at the city in front of him. You are? The leading guard was a little surprised and uncertain when he saw Antonio. He took out a picture scroll from his pocket and compared it repeatedly. Antonio did not say anything. He raised the staff in his hand. The starlight in the sky drooped down, forming 24 dazzling golden cards above his head. The card with the outline of a god was drawn. It emitted a divine aura. The Astrologer Tarot card. It's the Lord Astrologer. In other parts of the kingdom, it might not be very effective for Antonio to use that move, but that was the capital. The residents there recognized Antonio's signature ability. All the guards knelt. The gate in the center of the outermost wall surrounding the capital suddenly opened. The gates on the 7th, 8th, and 9th floors opened, layers after layers of gates opened, and melodious bells rang out from within the capital. White pigeons flew quickly across the sky, and a man in golden armor with an army with golden dragon patterns embroidered on their shoulders marched out. A burly man with a buzz cut led them. I am General Hone from the Holy Dragon Kingdom, and I am here to pay my respects to Master Antonio. His Majesty has arranged a banquet in the palace to welcome you, Master Antonio. Please head there as soon as possible. After the man named Hone spoke respectfully to Antonio, his gaze shifted toward Watson. This must be the rumored new disciple that Master Antonio has taken in at the border. It looks like he can conceal his power without leaking a single bit at his young age. It is as one would expect from your disciple. Even I can't see through him. His strength doesn't seem to be inferior to mine. He is indeed a young genius. General Hone. Watson bowed humbly to the man. As for Hone's compliment, he just smiled and did not respond. Watson, I know you're tired after the long journey, and you don't like that kind of banquet. Why don't I go to the banquet by myself? You can take Nightingale and Anise to participate in the Royal Academy's test. Antonio gave Watson a look. He knew that Watson and His Majesty had a conflict. At that moment, without waiting for Watson to act, Hone suddenly got down from his horse and came to Watson. Hone was 3 meters tall. At that moment, he was like a giant looking down on a dwarf. Watson must have felt pressured. I'm sorry, Master Antonio. His Majesty said that he wants your disciple to attend the banquet with you because he wants to see him. He said that he wanted to confirm the future pillar of the kingdom personally. No matter what His Majesty says, Watson, if you don't want to go, then I won't take you. Antonio chuckled, not taking Hone's words to heart at all. His attitude toward Watson surprised Hone a little. His Majesty said that Antonio would not disrespect him to such an extent. Furthermore, as Watson's teacher, why did he ask Watson for his opinion? He did not understand. His Majesty has requested that. It's not appropriate for me to refuse his request. Most importantly, I can't make things difficult for you, Master. Watson thought for a moment and revealed an innocent expression unique to a youth of his age. After agreeing to Hone's invitation, Watson and Antonio returned to the carriage. Hone's army guarded the carriage. After passing through 9 walls, they arrived at the spacious streets of the capital. There was news about Antonio's return to the capital, and the news had spread throughout the royal city. At that moment, both sides of the streets were filled with noble women or gentlemen dressed in luxurious clothes. They were eagerly waiting to see Antonio's carriage. That is Master Antonio's carriage. Is he in there? A woman with a parasol stared at the carriage escorted by the army with interest. General Hone is escorting them, so it must be Master Antonio's carriage. I can't believe it, Master Antonio hasn't left the Temple of the Stars for so many years. But this time, he took in a disciple. I wonder what that person looks like. Is he handsome? A woman with a rose in her hand asked. Lily Campbell, you're a disgrace to the Campbell family. You only know to ask if he's handsome. I heard that Master Antonio's disciple is taking the Royal Academy's test. If you can pass the test, won't you be able to see him then? Or is it too difficult for you? You don't have the confidence to pass the test. The woman holding the parasol teased, making the girl holding the rose unhappy. Of course, it's easy for me to pass the test. Charlotte, you'd better worry about yourself. I went to the Royal Academy to take the test yesterday and passed it. Now, I'm very curious about Master Antonio's disciple. I wonder what kind of results he will get if he passes the test? The Saint Laurent family requested Master Antonio to be my master back then, but he rejected it. Now, he has accepted a youth as his disciple. It seems that youth has a stronger talent than me. While sitting in the carriage, Watson quietly lifted the curtain and looked outside. He felt emotional when he saw the bustling scene on the street. Others had recognized Antonio in other parts of the kingdom, which caused a heated discussion among the masses. However, at that moment, it was not like that. The people who recognized Antonio were taken aback, and the people on both sides of the street cheered for him. As they welcomed him, they also praised Antonio. Master Antonio has finally returned. I heard that he took in a disciple, and he also made a breakthrough, breaking the curse of forever stagnating in platinum tier. And he even became younger. When he was young, Master Antonio was remarkably handsome. I still have his portrait passed down from my ancestors. Those words reached Watson's ears, allowing him to understand how famous Antonio was in the capital. What's wrong, Watson? Are you envious? Antonio turned around and smiled at him. Don't worry. In the future, you will be more popular with the people of the kingdom than me. My fame belongs to my era. From now on, the new era will belong to the young people. I hope so, Watson replied casually. He knew that his master was comforting him. The convoy strolled under the welcome of the people in the royal city. It took them half an hour to arrive at the royal palace. Master Antonio and young Master Watson, please come in. As for the rest of the irrelevant people, please stay here. Hone waved his hand at the guards in front of the splendid palace. The guards immediately gave way, and he said the second half of his sentence to Nightingale, who was in charge of driving the carriage, and Denise, who was in the carriage. Irrelevant people? General Hone, you have misunderstood. Those two are my handmaidens, not irrelevant people. Watson smiled. His Majesty only invited Master Antonio and young Master Watson, so everyone else is irrelevant. Don't worry, young Master Watson. Since His Majesty did not invite us, we are free to go anywhere. You can go with them. Nightingale was angry at Hone for calling them irrelevant, but it was not convenient for her to flare up, so she could only force a smile at Watson. General Hone, if His Majesty only invited me but not my maid, then it's fine for me not to attend that banquet. Watson did not even look at the magnificent palace in front of him. He immediately turned around and walked in the direction of Nightingale and Denise. That scene changed Hone's expression. He subconsciously reached out his hand toward Watson and said, "Young Master Watson, please wait." Hone's outstretched palm was covered with a layer of combat aura. The ground under Watson's feet was immediately covered with a circle of earth elements. Hone had infinitely enlarged the place that he could walk in just a few steps. One of his signature skills was to draw a soil barrier, a platinum-tier earth elemental combat skill. It could magnify the distance between two pieces of land by hundreds of times, trapping the enemy while also reducing the distance between himself and the enemy by hundreds of times. At that moment, he was using the effect to magnify the distance. However, Watson only smiled and raised his right foot. "General Hone, are you planning to use this move to stop me?" Watson crossed thousands of meters with a single step. He stood outside the area covered by the earth elements. That made Hone's pupils shrink subconsciously. When he first met Watson, he thought he could not see through Watson's strength, but it was not inferior to his. That was all his pride. A platinum tier elite was relatively rare in the kingdom. Naturally, he was proud of it. He did not think that the young boy, Watson, could compare with him. However, at that moment, his thoughts had to change. The young man had stepped out of his imprisonment easily. Watson might really be able to contend with him. All right, Watson, Hone, stop fighting for now. Let Nightingale and Anise come with us. Later, if His Majesty asks, tell him that I wanted them to come with us. His Majesty won't refuse me, right? Antonio stood to the side to mediate the situation. I wouldn't dare do that, Master Antonio. Almost as soon as his voice fell, another dignified voice sounded not far away from Antonio. Hearing that voice, the guards guarding the palace gate all knelt respectfully on the ground. Greetings, Your Majesty. Hone also turned his body and knelt behind him. Your Majesty. Following the direction where everyone was kneeling, Watson looked over and saw a middle-aged man wearing a luxurious golden robe and a crown on his head walking down from a carriage. Two maids beside him were carefully supporting him. That luxuriously dressed emperor did not have the sinister and reverential aura that Watson had imagined. On the contrary, he was very delicate. His square face had traces of wind and frost. His temples were slightly pale, and his eyes were filled with kindness. He gave people a sense of familiarity. That's King Landar III, the kingdom's current ruler. Watson sighed in his heart. Previously, he and the king had been in an invisible confrontation. At that moment, he finally met that important figure. While he was observing King Landar III, the king was also scrutinizing him from top to bottom. He had light golden hair, blue eyes, and not a single trace of aura leaked from his being. He was just like an ordinary person, but the divine radiance that lingered around Watson's body and the symbols that symbolized knowledge flashed in his eyes from time to time. It showed that Watson was not as simple as he looked. Of course, what surprised King Landar III the most was not those things but Watson's appearance. That appearance is the same as the face of the youth that the gods had shown him, causing the idols to lose their effectiveness all over the country. Is that Watson, the youth who had caused the idols to lose their power? King Landar III's heart was in turmoil. He had sent people to the City of Steel to search for the person who caused the idols to lose their effectiveness all over the country. That incident even attracted the gods' attention. In the end, there was no result. Just as King Landar III was about to let go of that matter, he saw Watson and realized that the youth was the same person he had been looking for. How could he not be surprised? After all, King Landar III had been the king for many years. He was very brilliant. So, he suppressed the excitement in his heart and walked toward Watson, extending his right hand. Before this, I had always wondered why Antonio valued you so much. Now that I've seen you, I have to admit that you are indeed exceptional. Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty. Watson took King Landar III's extended hand and shook it. As they shook hands, Watson felt a mysterious power enter his body as if searching for something. However, he pretended not to notice that power. Upon releasing his hand, King Landar III's expression did not change at all. It is the kingdom's fortune to have a platinum tier elite at your age. It looks like we will also get a diamond tier elite soon, similar to our current sword saint. Watson, as a reward for your talent, you can make a request later. However, before that, let us enter the palace. The banquet that I prepared for you is about to begin. Chapter 366, One of the Seven Gods. At the king's invitation, Watson and the others followed him into the main hall. At that moment, the main hall was already filled with nobles of all colors. After Watson entered the palace, those nobles all cast their gazes at him, their eyes flashing with all kinds of lights. Among those nobles, Watson saw a few familiar faces, such as Lana, who was standing in the Ptolemy family's seat, waving at him. Next to him was Casey, who was leaning on his walking stick. His expression was filled with complicated emotions. The Campbell and the Saint Laurent families, the other two archdukes in the kingdom, were beside the Ptolemy family. There were not many people from those two families. At the very front of the Campbell family stood a young man with pierced ears. His fiery red hair was tied into a ponytail, and he looked rather unruly. In his hand, he was gently shaking a wine cup. The Saint Laurent family was led by an expressionless girl who was the same age as Watson. Her purple hair fell on both sides of her ears, and her hair was woven into the shape of a drill. She was staring at the ground. She seemed to be uninterested in Watson and the surrounding environment. When he saw the two teenagers, the flow of magic elements in Watson's body slightly increased. He could sense that the two teenagers were not weak. They were at least at the peak of the gold tier, and they seemed to have quite a high position in the two families. Besides the three archdukes' families, there was also an old man with white hair. He had a kind expression and a wise gaze. He attracted Watson's attention. More than 10 people dressed like civil servants stood behind him. Other than that, there were also people from the Sword Saints family. They had sent 3 young men who were tall, short, fat, and thin, respectively. The only thing they had in common was that they were powerful. The 3 of them all emitted a biting, cold sword aura. What made Watson feel regretful was that he did not see Christina. He did not know if Christina had arrived in the capital. As Watson pondered that, he discovered that the king had walked to the hall and sat on the throne inlaid with gemstones. A maid pulled a curtain made of pearls. It covered the king's face, and only his dignified voice could be heard. "I am very happy today. Antonio, the astrologer, who has left the capital for several months, has returned today and brought back a young man with outstanding talent. That young man has done many glorious things, such as creating a divine mountain at the border and becoming the second person in history to clear the maze. He even turned the maze into the Tower of Babel. Now, that tower is exceptionally popular, and many famous adventurers in the kingdom have gone there because of its fame. If not for my official duties, I would have gone there to take a look." In addition to that, the young man had also arrived at the floating city a few days ago. He solved the problem with the Sea tribe and also eliminated the Severed Fingers gang. King Landar III spoke a lot behind the curtain of pearls. After he had the ministers' and nobles' attention, he stopped talking. "I'm really glad that the kingdom has such a talented young man. As expected of Master Antonio's disciple. It's not strange for him to have such a remarkable feat. I heard that that youth came from the border. It has been decades since there was a talent export from the border. Finally, he must be a genius." The nobleman followed King Landar III's words and praised Watson. Most of their words came from their hearts. After all, the famous generals might not be able to do what Watson had done. Even Campbell, the red-haired youth from the Saint Laurent family, and the cold-faced girl could not help but raise their heads when they heard Watson's achievements. They showed a curious expression on their faces. Watson, on the other hand, turned a deaf ear to the praise around him. In the eyes of others, His Majesty might be praising him, but he could hear that the words of that Supreme King of the kingdom had a hint of, "I know very well what you have done. Be more honest with me." "Thank you for your praise, Your Majesty. However, it was not only me who had accomplished those great feats. I could not have done it without the guidance of my master and the help of my family and friends," Watson responded humbly. "Watson, you don't have to be so humble. To those with the ability, being overly humble is a sign of pride. As Antonio's disciple, not only do I know very well about your achievements, I am also very curious about your strength. I wonder about your current strength." "Your Majesty, I am at the Platinum tier." After hesitating for a moment, Watson decided not to reveal his true strength. He had invited him there as soon as he arrived and even asked about his strength. The king must not have had any good intentions. What was Platinum tier? Are you for real? That youth was not lying, right? The nobleman instantly became excited, and they continued to discuss it. There are no more than 10 Platinum tier elites in the entire kingdom. I remember that the current Sword Saint holds the record for the youngest Platinum Tier Elite in history. He became a Platinum Tier Elite at the age of 16. That Watson doesn't look to be more than 13 years old, right? If he is a Platinum Tier Elite, it's equivalent to breaking the current Sword Saint's record. No wonder the noblemen were excited. If Watson were really Platinum Tier, they would be witnesses to a new history. Watson was a little helpless toward the reactions of those people. He had wanted to suppress his strength, but he did not expect that his hidden power would still surprise those people. If he told them his true strength, would not those nobles explode? Oh? You have Platinum Tier strength at such a young age. That really surprises me. However, words have no basis. Can you show it to me? Your Majesty, me and my disciple have just come off a long journey, and we are exhausted. If your Majesty wants to see his skills, I will let him go to your Majesty's bedroom and perform for you after he has rested. What do you think? Before Watson could speak, Antonio had already stood up and spoke on Watson's behalf. Watson and Antonio had seen through the king's intentions. It's just a casual display of his skills. I'm not asking Watson to fight against a Platinum Tier Elite for 300 rounds. A few days ago, it just so happens that General Hone brought back a peak gold tier magical beast from the south. Why don't we let Watson fight that magical beast and see how many rounds he can last before he kills that magical beast? I don't even want a precious magical beast, I just want to see Watson's strength. Antonio, you won't say no, right? Of course not. Since King Landar III had said that, Antonio had no way to refuse him. The magical beast that General Hone brought back from the south some time ago, was it the tainted unicorn? The unicorn was originally a magical beast unique to the Forest of Eternity in the south. Only pure-hearted people could handle it. However, that unicorn was somehow tainted and went berserk. Due to the unique characteristics of the unicorn, no one could restrain the gold-tier unicorn. However, General Hone had been able to do it. I wonder if the young man can match that. The noblemen discussed among themselves as King Landar III spoke. Then, the guards had brought the unicorn that the king mentioned. It was a magical beast that was more than 5 meters long and nearly 3 meters tall. As a gold-tier magical beast, its size was not considered huge, but the aura that the unicorn gave off was stronger than that of an ordinary gold-tier magical beast. The moonlight-like fur on the back of the unicorn's head appeared to be dancing in the shape of a wave. There was a spiral-shaped silver horn on top of its head that was wrapped with lightning. The unicorn's body looked like a horse was made of light. The unicorn was a kind of holy beast. Unfortunately, other than the holy aura on its body, there was also a trace of evil. Its silver eyes had a hint of blackness in them. Its pure white hooves were covered in a layer of pitch-black flames, with some blood-red lightning in the middle. It had a holy and depraved aura, which made the unicorn look very demonic. Peak gold tier magical beast, tainted unicorn. Attributes, light and darkness. Abilities, holy strike, using the horn as a weapon, the unicorn will launch continuous strikes as fast as lightning. Holy judgment, thunder that summons judgment to attack the enemy, causing large-scale gold-tier damage. Rapid self-healing, the unicorn will automatically heal its injuries. Holy enchantment, all attacks carry holy attributes, increasing the damage dealt to evil creatures. Additional abilities, contamination, the unicorn's body contains an even more powerful and evil soul. Mandala poison, the soul can control the unicorn to spit out poison, causing death. Black soul flame, the flame that can burn the soul, causing damage comparable to platinum tier. The moment the unicorn appeared, its information appeared in Watson's eyes. That unicorn has a soul in its body. It seems that His Majesty did not just want to test me. He did not come with good intentions. While Watson was muttering in his heart, King Landar III's voice sounded in the entire hall. That unicorn was originally a holy beast. I wanted to nurture it well. Unfortunately, it was tainted by external forces and became a beast that only knew how to hurt people. Even though I could not bear it, I understood it. I will need you to kill it. Do you need any weapons? If you do not, please feel free to tell me. I don't need any weapons. Watson shook his head and walked in front of the unicorn. When the tainted unicorn saw him, it immediately went berserk. Its body was in heavy chains, but at that moment, it raised its body high and raised its two front legs. It broke the chains and let out a shocking roar. Roar! A hurricane accompanied the roar. It blew past Watson and messed up his hair. Watson was calm, but behind him, many noblemen swallowed their saliva and subconsciously stepped back, nervously looking at the unicorn. After the unicorn roared, it opened its mouth, revealing fangs that were covered in sticky saliva. It tried to bite Watson's head. The unicorn was very fast, and its teeth were about to land on Watson's head. Some of the noblemen could not help but cry out in surprise. Then, Watson extended a finger toward the top of its head and gently cut it. Swish! A dazzling sword light flashed, and the unicorn's 2 rows of fangs were neatly cut off. The unicorn wailed and retreated as its blood oozed. Good swordsmanship. Most of the people in the crowd did not understand Watson's swordsmanship. Only the 3 youths sent by the current sword saint understood the battle between Watson and the unicorn. Their eyes lit up when they saw Watson's sword technique. After releasing his sword technique, Watson did not stop there. He walked toward the unicorn, stretched his second finger outward, and lightly cut the ground where the beast stood. The ground instantly exploded, revealing long and thick cracks. The unicorn's skin and fur condensed by the light were also torn open, and blood that emitted a faint fluorescent light sprayed out. Watson's swordsmanship was not some platinum-tier battle technique. It was only a sword technique that he had casually used with some help from the Einherjar's body. Even though it was ordinary swordsmanship, it was not weaker than a full-strength attack from a platinum-tier elite. Roar! With a painful wail, flashes of lightning suddenly appeared on the body of the tainted unicorn. Its entire body turned into light as it rushed toward Watson. Due to its breakneck speed, there was a burning smell in the air. Many noblemen blinked their eyes. They could no longer see the movements of the unicorn clearly. The unicorn's signature skill was the Holy Strike. As a magical beast from the Forest of Eternity, the unicorn was holy and fast. It was a peak gold tier magical beast, yet the speed displayed was not inferior to a platinum tier elite. Faced with such an attack, Watson should not have been able to block it easily. Many people had that thought in their minds, but the next scene shocked them. Before the lightning-fast unicorn could reach Watson, the young man had turned into a bolt of lightning and jumped behind the unicorn's lightning. 2 bolts of electricity tangled in the air, revealing the unicorn's true form. Watson's body was unscathed. On the contrary, the unicorn's horn was broken into 2. Then, the unicorn fell weakly to the ground, dying. Many people did not see what Watson had done, but they understood one thing. Watson has won. He only used 2 moves to defeat the unicorn. That youth is so powerful. The noblemen's discussions filled the hall. The fiery-haired youth with the Campbell family no longer shook his wine cup. Instead, he gripped it tightly. His fiery red eyes, which were the same color as his hair, were burning with fighting spirit. I can defeat the unicorn in 2 moves as well. I wonder if Lord Antonio's disciple is stronger than me. As he spoke, the scarlet wine in the cup burned into flames and gradually evaporated. The cold girl in front of the Saint Laurent family also glanced at Watson. Her hair moved even though there was no wind. She raised her hand and pressed them down. Your Majesty, I wonder if my display just now will satisfy you. Watson walked toward the unicorn and asked King Landar III behind the pearl curtain. King Landar III did not expect Watson to defeat the unicorn so quickly. After a long silence, he said, Watson, your strength has exceeded my expectations. I'm very satisfied. What kind of reward do you want? Then I won't stand on ceremony. My request is very simple. I hope your majesty can give me that unicorn. What does he want with it? Everyone was curious about that request, they looked befuddled. That unicorn had already been beaten until it was on the verge of death, and it was clearly tainted with something. The beast was delirious. Why would Watson want it? Was he not afraid that it would explode and hurt other people? Watson ignored the crowd, he bowed to King Landar III and waited for a response. Well, I did ask for your request. Since that is what you wanted, then I have no reason to reject it. From now on, that unicorn is yours. Thank you, your majesty. I'm a little tired right now because I just fought that unicorn. I will not attend the next banquet. I hope that your majesty can approve that. Yes, I approve. Lowering his head toward King Landar III again, Watson puffed out his chest and extended his right hand to the unicorn beside him. He cast a spatial teleportation spell and left the palace with the unicorn. Upon arriving at a dark alley in the capital, he cast a layer of magical barrier at the entrance. He extended his right hand toward the unicorn and muttered, "Absolute healing." As the diamond tear spell was activated, the dying unicorn suddenly stood up and became energetic. Its broken teeth and horn had recovered as well. At the same time, wisps of black liquid flowed out of the unicorn's eyes and nose. The black liquid was incompatible with the unicorn, but it was unwilling to leave its body as if it had a life of its own. As a result, Watson pulled it out forcefully, and it squirmed in the air. It transformed into a terrifying image with a leopard's head and bird wings. Lowly human, I must praise you for detecting my existence. But, I won't need to be polite toward you. Arg! The terrifying fog in front of Watson squirmed, and an awe-inspiring voice came from within it. A large lump of black viscous liquid spewed out from within the mist, sprinkling toward Watson's head. It contained the aura of death. Whenever it passed, the air would wither. As the viscous liquid dripped onto the ground, it caused the hard rock ground to vanish into thin air. However, before the poisonous liquid could land on Watson's body, the young man grabbed the black spirit and held it firmly in his hand. That caused the black spirit's body to become distorted, and it let out a series of miserable cries. Pain, pain, pain. Little brat, stop. Tell me, who are you, and why do you possess that unicorn? And what is your relationship with the king? Let me go before you ask these questions. Impudent brat. Ow. It's too painful. Fine, I'll tell you. My name is F.A.T.C.A.T.S, and I am the goddess of shadow and potion. I am one of the 7 gods worshipped by the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Chapter 367, He couldn't let him live. One of the 7 gods. Watson held the black viscous liquid in his hand, allowing it to change its shape as he muttered to himself. He knew that the Holy Dragon Kingdom had 7 gods. They were Baldur, the god of light, Agars, the god of wind and navigation, F.A.T.C.A.T.S, the goddess of shadows and potions, Ares, the god of war and hunting, Diana, the goddess of love, Gaia, the god of earth and fertility, and Amun, the god known as the time traveler. Watson had only heard of those 7 gods. After all, when he was in the City of Steel, he had learned a little about them because he had helped the St. Antilles Cathedral repair the sculptures. However, no matter how he looked at it, he could not connect that dark mass with a high and mighty god. That's right. I am a god. Furthermore, I am the great goddess F.A.T.C.A.T.S, ranked in the top 3 among the 7 gods. Do you fear me now? The leopard-headed goddess proudly opened her pitch-black mouth and let out a barbell-like laugh. Tell me the truth. What exactly are you? That hurts. Stop it, brat. I already told you that I am a god. Why don't you believe me? Don't think that I'm gullible just because I'm young. I'm going to count to 3. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll absorb you and turn you into a part of my body. Give me a chance. I can prove it to you. While the self-proclaimed goddess, F.A.T.C.A.T.S, was begging for mercy, Watson let go of her hand and decided to give her a chance. As a god who controls shadows and potions, my main body lives outside of this world. What's here is only a part of my projection. Even though it's a projection, I can still display miracles that ordinary people can't do. I'll let you witness it. As she rubbed her body made of black material, F.A.T.C.A.T.S stretched out something that looked like a tentacle and waved it at the ground. Pitch-black figures immediately appeared on the surrounding walls. Those figures intertwined together and grew wildly. Gradually, they gathered and became shadows that blotted out the sky and the sun. The shadow opened its black and white eyes and looked down at the world. Its body was connected to the shadows behind every pedestrian on the street below. The shadows were connected, and the pedestrians on the road seemed to be controlled. A smile appeared on the shadow's face. That scene looked particularly frightening. "How is it, brat? Isn't that miracle great? Can you verify my identity now?" Watson looked up into the sky and nodded. "I can tell that that is a rule-based ability. A clone that can use a rule-based ability. You must be a real god. However, you're different from the sculptures made by the church. I did not expect a real god to be so ugly." Although the sculptures in the church retained the characteristics of mythical creatures, they were all handsome men and beautiful women, which was in line with human aesthetic standards. "Brat, why are your words so irritating? I'm a god. Shouldn't you be more respectful to me? Do you have anything worthy of my respect? You. Forget it. I can't be bothered to tell you that. As a tolerant god, I forgive your disrespect. As a price, you need to offer your faith to me and praise my name. I will bless you with invincible divine power and extraordinary wisdom," and without waiting for F.A.T.C.A.T.S to finish speaking, Watson had already exerted a little strength and crushed the black fog in his hand, revealing a thoughtful expression. "I did not expect that the 7 gods that protect the kingdom actually exist, and the king has a relationship with those 7 gods. This is going to be difficult." He had wanted to find out how many platinum tier elites the king had by his side, and then overthrow the kingdom and climb to the peak by himself. After all, everyone on Mount Creation was a platinum tier elite, and they were immortal. He was not afraid, even if there were more platinum tier experts around the king than he had imagined. However, when he knew that the king was related to an unknown god, he had to make a long-term plan. After advancing to the diamond tier, Watson finally understood how powerful the starlight tier was. Common sense could not be used to judge a starlight tier elite. The banquet officially began not long after Watson left the palace. The noblemen in the palace held wine glasses and tasted delicious food. Most of them had regretful expressions on their faces. "What a pity! That young man clearly has such powerful strength, but he is so arrogant. He actually left without even attending His Majesty's banquet. Yet, I still want to get close to that young man and see if he can join our family. From the looks of it, it should be very difficult for me to get that young man on my side." Many nobles discussed it. To them, it did not matter how strong a person was. The key was whether they could use that person. Of course, there were also a few noblemen who showed great interest in Watson. Those noblemen chose to ask Lana and Casey, who came from the Ptolemy family. "Young Master Casey, young Miss Lana, I heard that Watson had been to the floating city before he entered the royal city. He even had dealings with the Ptolemy family. I wonder, other than his outstanding strength, how are his knowledge and self-restraint? Which noble family did he come from? Other than the deeds mentioned by His Majesty, what other achievements did he have?" Watson was not only outstanding, but he was also very knowledgeable. His most famous deed was to pretend to be him and save the floating city, becoming the city's hero. Casey used a fork and knife to mash the steak on the plate. He complained in his heart. How could he say those words? He did not say anything. Lana, on the other hand, was smiling as she chatted with the nobleman. "Watson is a very considerate nobleman. I danced with him when he first got to our family manor. From his dancing, I knew that he had received a high-quality education. It's not only that, but Watson also knows a lot about shipbuilding technology. He invented a ship called the submarine, which can operate underwater without any risk. I believe that it won't be long before that brand new ship will appear in the kingdom. Is that so? Then I'll have to wait and see. King Landar III did not care about the discussion. A woman's voice filled his mind. She was cursing loudly in his mind. I'm so angry. That damned Watson destroyed my projection without giving me a chance to speak. It caused me to lose my power for nothing. The most important thing is that he disrespected me. C.D., didn't you say that you would attack Watson and that you would make him submit and be sacrificed obediently? You must have been too careless to have such an outcome. Since we've already alerted the enemy, it seems like we can't let C.D. continue with the attack. Next, it's up to me, Agars, the god of wind and navigation, to think of a way to sacrifice that youth. After C.D., a different voice sounded in King Landar III's mind. Sunlight shone through the pearl curtain and fell on his body. Behind him, there was a squirming, strange-looking shadow. All right, stop arguing. C.D., I gave you a chance, but you didn't grasp it. I'll have to make a new plan before the next attack. However, I'm curious about how he could kill your projection. That isn't something a Platinum Tier professional can do. Perhaps Watson's strength is no longer Platinum Tier. Sid was silent for a long time before she slowly said, of course he's not Platinum Tier. He's a Diamond Tier elite. Diamond Tier? King Landar III was absent-mindedly looking at the ministers in the hall. His smile froze on his face, and then his eyes became gloomy. He was a very controlling emperor. If Watson was only a Platinum Tier elite, he did not care if he was the youngest Platinum in the kingdom's history, but Watson was a Diamond Tier elite. That was a different story. Watson had achieved the Diamond Tier. In the future, he was very likely to become a Starlight Tier elite. He would be someone who could break away from his control and hinder his plans. Any factor that hindered him would only have one consequence. A killing intent flashed in his eyes. Previously, a large part of the reason he had to deal with Watson was to complete the deal with those gods. However, Landar III could no longer let Watson live. Chapter 368, Fill Marks for the Assessment. That is the Royal Academy. After crushing C.D.'s projection, Watson thought that he had nothing to do for the time being. It would be better to pass the Royal Academy's assessment first. Thus, he rode his unicorn to the Royal Academy entrance. Due to the absence of C.D.'s influence, the unicorn had recovered its health. Its 5-meter-long body had fur brighter than the moonlight, and its body was softer than cotton. Sitting on the unicorn's body, Watson felt as if he was sitting on a soft cloud. It was very comfortable. At that moment, Watson looked up. He saw a gorgeous academy. Tall white spires could be seen everywhere. Everyone was exuding an extraordinary aura. It was spring. There were tall trees with light pink flowers on both sides of the academy's streets. With the wind blowing, the fragrance of the blossoms filled the air. Under the trees, 2 male students, who looked to be around 16 or 17 years old, were sitting at a wooden table. In front of them was a long line of hundreds of people signing up to join the academy. Those who want to join the academy, line up please, one by one. Please give us a detailed report based on your age, strength, and information. We will not recruit anyone over the age of 18 who is not even silver tier. If you have a recommendation letter, you can get an exception. Do not try to hide your information. We have mastered the gold tier magic inside eye. We can easily see through you. The 2 male students who spoke had obvious pride on their faces. It was no wonder that they had become members of the Royal Academy at such a young age. It was enough to prove that their talents were extraordinary. Furthermore, they had been arranged to recruit new students. It was clear that the teachers trusted them. The hundreds of people in line looked nervous. They were afraid that they would not be able to satisfy the 2 male students and be eliminated later. Under such circumstances, Watson's participation quickly attracted the attention of hundreds of students. "Look at that person, he actually rode a unicorn to come here. He came to register for the Royal Academy and is still so ostentatious. It will be interesting if that person is not strong enough and would get eliminated." Some envied Watson because he had a unicorn, while some ridiculed it. Those who could participate in the Royal College's interview were either very confident in their own talent or from a wealthy family. They also did not flaunt their wealth like Watson because true noblemen would not flaunt their wealth like those country bumpkins or nouveau riche. The students noticed Watson, and the 2 male students in charge of the assessment also saw Watson's appearance. They frowned. When Watson reached the front of the line, they took out a quill pen and the registration list. Name: Watson. Watson. Why is that name so familiar? I seem to have heard it somewhere before. The 2 male students in charge of the assessment muttered in their hearts. They did not pay much attention to it and continued to ask, "What tier is your strength?" Since it looked like Watson was 12 or 13 years old, they did not ask about his age. They only asked about his strength. If he were not even silver tier, they would reject him immediately. He should not have acted so arrogantly. He even rode a unicorn to the event. Strength? I would say platinum tier. What do you mean you would say? Kid, you're here to cause trouble on purpose, aren't you? It was what it was. If he had not reached it, then he was not that. What did he mean? Furthermore, that kid said that he was platinum tier. How old was he? He must be joking if he thought that they would believe he had reached platinum tier at that age. The 2 students had already determined that Watson was there to cause trouble. However, they still activated their gold tier magic inside eye and swept it over Watson's body due to their professionalism. Watson's information immediately appeared before them. Name: Watson. Gender: male. Age: 13. Strength: platinum tier. He's really at platinum tier? How is that possible? Did we see it wrongly? The 2 students in charge of the test suddenly stood up. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they looked at Watson. At the same time, there was a commotion among the people queuing behind Watson because someone had said something. Watson? I remember where I heard that name before. Isn't that the name of Master Antonio's disciple from the border? I remember it too. Just now, I was at the to welcome Master Antonio. I saw Master Antonio's carriage enter the palace with my own eyes. During that time, I heard the people around me talking. They said that Master Antonio's disciple, Watson, was fortunate enough to be invited to the palace by His Majesty. Why would he appear here? The other people in the registration team also recalled Watson's name. If that youth were Master Antonio's disciple, then it would make sense. Watson was only 13 years old and was already a platinum tier elite. He even had a unicorn. Even if he rode a dragon, no one would say anything. Are you Master Antonio's disciple? That's right, I am. Watson openly admitted it. I'm sorry, I didn't know who you were. Since you're Master Antonio's disciple, then we can omit the need for the information. You can go and get your strength tested. The test might be difficult for others, but it should be very easy for a genius like you. One of the 2 examiners stood up and smiled politely at Watson. Let me introduce myself. My name is Newman. I'm a 4th-year student here. If you don't mind, you can call me Senior Brother. Hello, Senior Brother. Watson nodded in agreement and followed Newman into the academy. A group of people were behind him in a queue. They looked at him with envy. They also wanted to skip the line and directly enter the academy to participate in the test. However, they did not have Watson's strength and background. As expected of Master Antonio's disciple. It was really stylish of him to ride a unicorn here. Only a noble person can tame a unicorn. That young man must be powerful and kind. The people who had just ridiculed Watson for showing off his wealth changed their tone at that moment. They did not feel that Watson was showing off his wealth, but they also thought it was low-key, luxurious, and profound. If they were Antonio's disciples, they would definitely arrange for 8 people to carry the carriage and send them there. It would be best if they could install 2 large loudspeakers on both sides of the carriage and play it on a loop to let everyone know that they were Antonio's disciples. What are you looking at? If you have time to look at others, why don't you think about how you are going to pass the first round of the assessment? The remaining assessment staff berated the youths there, that broke their reverie. Some could not help but look back with a somewhat envious expression. They were not jealous of Watson but of his companion named Newman because he could accompany Watson in the assessment. While everyone was discussing it outside, Newman had already led Watson to the assessment site in the academy. It was a vast, hemisphere-shaped building, similar to the Colosseum in ancient Rome. However, the place was not filled with wild beasts. Instead, there were fortresses made of high-quality ores. Inside the fortresses were mannequins that were also made of ores. What was surprising was that those mannequins were engraved with magic circles. They could move at a breakneck speed without a human's control. They were no less than ordinary gold-tier warriors. In front of those fortresses stood many noble children dressed in luxurious clothes. There were mages, warriors, and even archers and priests. Those people were doing their best to break the mannequins that were moving in those fortresses. Every time a mannequin was broken, a teacher would use a quill to record the person's score on a piece of parchment. Lily of the Campbell family has passed the test. She broke 8 puppets in 1 minute and scored 80 points. She can be assigned to the Magic Courts Class A. At that moment, the voice of a teacher caught Watson's attention. A girl in a mage robe was wiping the sweat off her head. She walked out of the training ground. Her fiery red hair was tied into a ponytail, and her exquisite face was filled with joy. Charo, I scored 80 points. Even though there is a gap between you and my 90 points, we will be assigned to the same class. Congratulations, Lily. The woman named Charo had light purple hair, and her face was equally beautiful. There was a black mole at the right corner of her eye, which added to her charm. Similar to Lily, the 2 girls looked to be around 13 or 14 years old. As if sensing Watson's gaze, the 2 girls exchanged a few words and turned their heads at the same time, meeting Watson's gaze in mid-air. Charo, look at that youth staring at me. Does my beauty attract him? Lily whispered into Charo's ear, and her friend laughed. Silly Lily, you really know how to flatter yourself. I don't think he's attracted to you, but he's surprised by your score. After all, only 40% of the people who passed the first round could enter this place, not to mention the 10% of the people who could get a high score of 80. That young man looks like a stranger. It should be his first time coming to the Royal Academy to take the test. The Royal Academy's test was different every year. That was to prevent someone from cheating. That year's test was to shoot targets. Those targets were all made by famous artisans in the royal city. They had mobility comparable to gold-tier warriors. In other words, that year's test was to see how many of those gold-tier mannequins those new students could kill in a minute. Even though those targets would not fight back, it was not that easy to kill them. Those who could kill 10 or 8 targets in a minute could already be called top geniuses. Of course, the Royal Academy's tests were different each year, but there was no limit to the number of times the applicants could participate in the trial. As long as they could pass the first round of selection, the students could try their luck before the school started, leaving the best results for themselves to ensure the rational allocation of classes. The students in the Royal Academy did not attend classes together. Instead, they were divided into 4 groups: magicians, warriors, priests, and archers, according to their different cultivation professions. Each department was then divided into 4 classes A, B, C, and D. The 4 faculties of the Academy held a competition called the Academy Cup every year, and it was the same between the classes. The intense competition made every student who walked out of the academy a warrior who had experienced hundreds of battles. Before participating in the assessment, you must first choose which faculty you want to join and what profession you want to become in the future. Watson, since you are Master Antonio's disciple, you will definitely choose to join the mage department, right? Newman led Watson to the assessment venue and introduced him at the same time. He did not deliberately lower his voice, causing the conversation between him and Watson to spread throughout the assessment venue quickly. Many people who had already completed the assessment or had yet to enter the arena raised their heads. Their eyes flickered. Master Antonio's disciple is here. He is also participating in the Royal Academy's assessment. I wonder what kind of results he will obtain. Everyone did not doubt Watson's choice. He was definitely from the mage faculty. With Watson joining the mage faculty, he would definitely suppress the other faculties. Many people from the mage faculty were happy about Watson's arrival. The people from the other faculties appeared disappointed. However, what surprised them was that Watson looked around the 4 areas of the assessment venue. His gaze passed through the mage faculty assessment area and finally settled on the warrior faculty assessment area. If I can only choose one faculty to join, I choose the warrior faculty. What? Newman, who was closest to Watson, did not seem to hear Watson's words. He rubbed his ears and said, Watson, you said you wanted to join the warrior faculty. Are you sure you've made the right choice? I made the right choice. I'm sure that I want to join the warrior faculty, Watson replied firmly. He already had Antonio as his teacher in the field of magic. Furthermore, he had already mastered thousands of platinum tier spells with all the attributes. On the contrary, he did not have much knowledge about fighting techniques. One of the purposes for him entering the royal city was to find a sword saint to be his teacher and obtain a promotion in the warrior class. Since that was the case, he might as well join the warrior department and learn some basic knowledge about warriors. Watson should not think that he is Master Antonio's disciple. Otherwise, there would be nothing to learn in the Royal Academy's mage department, right? If that was the case, then he was too arrogant. The teachers in the Royal Academy might not be as strong as Master Antonio, but they were all professional scholars and had made outstanding contributions in their respective fields. They might not necessarily be inferior to Master Antonio. Some people could guess Watson's thoughts, and their faces turned ugly, especially those from the mage department. Watson's move to switch from the mage department to the warrior department was undoubtedly a sign of contempt for them. Many of them began to sneer in their hearts. If Watson went to the warrior department to participate in the assessment later, it would be a joke if he failed. Young Master Watson, are you sure you want to participate in the warrior department assessment? There is no limit to the number of times you can take the assessment at the Royal Academy. If you can't pass the warrior assessment, you can also change to another class assessment, such as the magic class. After Watson made his declaration, a teacher in charge of the assessment quickly came before him. That teacher had a burly build and a full beard. He was like a walking giant bear. The hint in his words was very obvious. Obviously, he did not think much of Watson, who wanted to join the warrior department. Rest assured, teacher. If I could not pass the assessment, I would then consider other classes. What should I do if I participate in the assessment now? What you need to do is very simple. You need to stand outside the assessment field and only use combat aura to smash the moving targets in the field. The time limit is 1 minute. During that time, the more targets you smash, the better your results will be. However, you cannot use the abilities of other occupations. Otherwise, it will be a violation. Do you understand? Yes, teacher. I understand, Watson replied and walked to the area where the warrior assessment was taking place. The people there retreated a distance to give him some space. In the distance, Lily and Charo were watching that scene and discussing it in low voices. What a pity, Lily. It seems that Master Antonio's disciple doesn't seem to be interested in our Royal Academy's mage department. You are not fated to be with him. What do you mean I have no fate with him? Charo, don't you also want to be in the same class as Master Antonio's disciple? Lily pouted and looked in Watson's direction. But that person is really overestimating himself. As a mage, it's good that he came to the mage department, but he insisted on going to the warrior department. Does he intend to become a powerful warrior while practicing magic? That's too unrealistic. The warrior department lacks large-scale attacks, so the assessment is even harder than the magic department. Anyway, he will give up after hitting a wall. Many people had similar thoughts to Lily and Charlotte. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Watson moved his body a few times to signal to the teacher that it was okay. When the assessment teacher said, "The trial begins," then, he stomped his foot gently. A light elemental law domain immediately appeared beneath his feet. Countless light weapons flew out and instantly pierced through all the artificial forms on the field. There were more than 500 artificial bodies in the fortress on the field. At that moment, cracks appeared from all directions. They fell to the ground and broke into two pieces. Green smoke rose from the hundreds of broken puppets in the assessment field. The entire hall was silent. Others could kill 10 or 8 puppets in a minute, but Watson had killed all of them in one strike. What kind of strength was that? After a long while, the teacher in charge of the assessment broke the silence. "Watson, I just said that you are only allowed to use combat aura and not magic. Otherwise, you would lose the qualification to take the assessment. Do you hear me?" To be honest, he did not even see what Watson had done. He only saw a flash of light under Watson's feet and countless rays of light rising into the sky. That scene was very similar to magic, so he judged that Watson had cheated. "Teacher, I did not use magic." "What do you mean you did not use magic? Combat skills can't be used in such a large-scale attack or be that fast." The teacher was confident about that. Watson did not speak. He only repeated what he had just done. A huge law domain appeared beneath his feet, where many glowing weapons were floating. However, at that time, he did not use light weapons to attack quickly. Instead, he allowed them to fly out at a speed that everyone there could see clearly. They crushed the gold tier puppets that had already shattered on the assessment grounds once again. "Teacher, do you believe that I'm not using magic now?" The assessment teacher opened his mouth wide, unable to speak for a long time. After a long while, the teacher picked up a quill and wrote a few words on the parchment. "Watson for the Warrior Department, Assessment Result Full Score. Chapter 369, Transfer this place to me. Have you heard? A genius has appeared at the Royal Academy. He obtained a full score in the Warrior Department assessment. Isn't there a small number of geniuses who can achieve 100 points every year? What's the fuss? Idiot. The one you're talking about is 100 points, it's different from the full score. That 100 points can be obtained in the assessment as long as you clear 10 or more gold tier puppets within a minute. However, a full score is different. If you want to achieve a full score, you have to kill all the puppets within the stipulated time. The person who gets 100 points proves that his ability is only 100 points, while the person who gets full marks proves that the difficulty of the test is only worth 100 points. It seems that that person is really powerful. I wonder who he is. He is Master Antonio's newest disciple. His name is Watson. When I heard that Master Antonio had taken in a disciple, I wondered who had such a bit of luck. Now, it seems that it is not unreasonable for Master Antonio to take in that disciple. 2 students of the Royal Academy were sitting on the assessment grounds and chatting, waiting for the test to begin. People like them were not uncommon around there. More than an hour had passed since Watson passed the warrior test. Since Watson had destroyed all the puppets in the warrior test field, those who wanted to pass the warrior test had to wait outside the area. They could only enter the field after the Academy's maintenance staff repaired the puppets. Wow, those puppets have been wholly destroyed. Even though there isn't any damage on the surface, the combat aura has crushed the magic core inside. Furthermore, only the magical core has been destroyed. There isn't even a single crack on the part that is close to the magical core. That terrifying destructive power and control is really not something a 12 or 13-year-old youth can master. The teacher in charge of the maintenance was a middle-aged man. He was dressed in greasy clothes and had stubble all over his face. His slightly melancholic eyes sparkled after he sized the puppets on the ground. "Dean, may I ask if those puppets have been repaired? Some young nobles can't wait to participate in the assessment." At that moment, a few senior students came in front of the middle-aged man and asked about that respectfully. That middle-aged man was the school's fourth-year director of education. At the same time, he was also the head of the entire Holy Dragon Kingdom's engineering department. He specialized in researching magic weapons for the kingdom to expand military supplies. His name was Vincent Wilhelm Theo. "Let those kids wait. There are about 500 puppets that have been destroyed here. Even if I wanted to repair them, it wouldn't be so easy. Those noble brats usually only know how to eat and do nothing. They don't train hard, but when it comes to the assessment, they are so serious. If it were up to me, those people should ask their parents to hire a family tutor to harm their servants and maids. Don't go to school." But two of them are from the Archduke's families, the Campbells and the St. Lawrence. They specifically asked you to complete the repair as soon as possible so as not to waste their time. So the two Archduke's kids are also here. Then I have to finish the work as soon as possible. Tell the young masters that I only need 10 more minutes. Upon hearing that there were two people from the Archduke's families, Theo immediately looked out of the venue and changed his tone. That was because the three Archduke's families contributed a lot of money to the engineering department every year to provide them with research. In other words, those three great families were the financial backers of the Ministry of Engineering. Of course, if that was all, then as the minister, Theo did not need to be so polite with them. There was only one reason why he was like that. The two kids from the Campbells and the St. Lawrence were not ordinary family members but members who held high positions in the family. "Nia St. Laurent Gary, you are really annoying. Wherever I go, you follow me like a fan." The person who spoke was a youth with a red ponytail and dressed in a gorgeous robe. He was waving a goblet in his hand. The red wine in the goblet spun non-stop, as if it would fly out of the goblet in the next moment but was unable to do so. It was as if that young man had just walked out of some banquet. If Watson were still here, he would recognize him because that youth was the youth that previously attracted the Campbell family's attention. "Augustus Campbell, I'm not following you. It's more like you're blocking my way." The person who responded to the red-haired ponytailed youth was a purple-haired girl. Her expression was cold, and as she spoke, the curls that hung on both sides of her head slightly rose. Her hair was several times longer, turning into long steel wires that cut through the air. On top of that, ice shards of varying lengths sealed the youth named Augustus in the middle. Crack! Cracks appeared on the ground amidst a series of cracking sounds. Without a doubt, if those hairs were to cut into the young man's body, they would cut him into pieces of rotten meat. "Nia, you dare to attack me?" the young man asked in surprise. He took 2 steps back and threw out the red wine in the goblet in his hand. The red wine immediately turned into a rising flame that expanded countless times, dyeing the surrounding area red. The fiery red flame condensed into a giant python. It opened its bloody mouth above the young man's head and burned the young girl's hair into ashes in one bite. After doing all that, Augustus stared at Nia with slightly reddened eyes. His eyes were filled with violence. The air he was breathing contained a high temperature, and even the air distorted. "Come on, Nia, is that all you can do? Let's have a good fight." "Boring. I'm not in the mood to fight with you. I'm here to participate in the assessment." Nia did not even look at Augustus. Her cold gaze was only fixed on the puppets that were gradually being repaired in the warrior assessment venue. It was as if she was only interested in those puppets. Watson had disappeared after performing a great battle against the unicorn just a moment ago. As geniuses from the Campbell and the St. Laurent families, even though they were very curious about Watson, as nobles, they had no choice but to persevere until the last moment of the banquet. The Royal Academy had just announced that the kingdom had produced its first genius in recent years, with a full score, and his name was Watson. That news caused the noblemen to boil with excitement. Only then did they realize that Watson had used the excuse of being tired to leave with the unicorn. It turned out that he had gone to participate in the Royal Academy's assessment and had just displayed his skills in front of the Emperor. It had only been a short while before he had broken the Academy's record. It was truly remarkable. Similarly, Augustus and Nia were also boiling with excitement. As the top geniuses of their two families, they were naturally also one of the new students of the Royal Academy. Furthermore, they had obtained a good score of 100 points in the assessment. However, such results were far inferior to a full score. Regardless of whether it was the prideful Augustus or the cold and indifferent Nia, they were both very young. They were both geniuses, so why were their results inferior to Watson's? Thus, the following scene happened. Nia, you're right. I can fight with you anytime, but I only have one chance to break the record. I'm a gentleman. Why don't you go first? Oh, right. I almost forgot that you're a mage. Do you plan to complete the warrior department's assessment? Augustus rolled his eyes. The high temperature spewing from his mouth gradually subsided, and his eyes returned to normal from their red color. Nia did not say anything. She only took a few steps forward and arrived at the edge of the mage assessment site. At that moment, a few students were still testing at the edge of the assessment site. When they saw Nia, they immediately stopped what they were doing. They weakly walked to the side so that Nia could use the site. Miss Nia, do you want to participate in the test? You have already achieved 100 points in the test. I wonder if there is still a need for you to take the test. The teacher who was responsible for recording the results came to Nia's side and asked curiously. Previously, I thought that 100 points were enough. But now, 100 points is no longer enough to satisfy me, so I want to get a full score. As Nia spoke, a huge hexagram-shaped snowflake magic array appeared behind her. The magic array flickered with a sky-blue light, and white ice crystals erupted from within, freezing the ground and air into solid ice. A few students who were closer to her, including the Academy's teachers, could not help but step back. In that huge magic array, two giant palms suddenly stretched outward. Those two palms were made of ice and snow, and they floated beside Nia. They stretched out for 100 meters, like two shields that were magnified countless times. Platinum tier magic, the blooming of extreme cold hell. The voice flew out from her delicate lips. The two huge ice-cold arms flew to the center of the assessment field and collided with each other. The sound of the enormous palms clapping resounded through the sky, causing many people who were preparing to take the test to cover their ears in pain. In the center of the clapping area, a bottomless pit appeared on the ground. The hundreds of puppets in the center were crushed into dust. The puppets did not have time to escape before a layer of white ice appeared on their bodies. With a cracking sound, they gradually broke into pieces and turned into ice shards on the ground. With just one strike, Nia killed hundreds of puppets, turning the entire mage assessment venue into a white purgatory. However, Nia turned around and walked out as if nothing had happened. When she passed by the assessment teacher, she stopped in her tracks. The teacher suddenly shivered. He came to his senses and took out a quill to record Nia's results in his notebook. Nia from the mage department, assessment result full marks. Nia had displayed her prowess. Then, Augustus frowned and revealed an affronted expression. Have the puppets in the warrior assessment not been repaired yet? Yes, young Master Augustus. With my hard work, it only took me 8 minutes to repair them. I'm Theo, the head of the engineering department. I'm an old friend of your father's. Theo wiped the grease and sweat off his forehead. With a smile on his face, he came to Augustus from the assessment site. However, he was interrupted by Augustus before he could finish his words. Get out of my way. Don't delay my participation in the assessment. Why are you talking so much? Platinum tier fire element spell, roaring ancient fire python. As he pushed Theo away, Augustus opened his palm toward the assessment site in front of him. A giant ball of flame appeared in front of him. That flame was like a wave, and long fire snakes that were several meters thick crawled out from within it. They shot out like sharp arrows at the puppets that were frantically escaping. However, under the terrifying heatwave and flames, the escaping puppets had only run a few steps before they were melted. The repaired assessment site was charred once again, and more than 500 puppets were reduced to ruins. Augustus retracted his hand and looked in Nia's direction proudly. He realized that Nia was not looking at him and was about to walk to the door. He immediately spat and followed up with dissatisfaction, leaving behind a group of stunned people. Augustus from the Warrior Department, assessment result full score. A teacher recorded that result silently. That is already the third full score today. Who would have thought that after Watson, Augustus, and Nia would refresh their original results? Is that a challenge to Watson? After all, I heard that Augustus and Nia had tried to recruit Antonio as their teacher, but they were both rejected. Perhaps that is a disguised form of venting their inner dissatisfaction. After Augustus and Nia left, some students gathered to discuss the situation in a low voice. Some of them came to Theo's side and asked awkwardly, Master Theo, what should we do now? What else can we do? Fix it. Theo stomped his feet angrily and walked down the examination field while cursing. Young people nowadays really don't know how to be polite. They don't even reply to their elders. I told you that we should let those noble children stay at home and hire some private tutors for them to learn the noble etiquette properly. He had spent a lot of effort to repair the more than 500 puppets that Watson had broken. Then, not only did he have to fix the Warrior assessment site, but he also had to repair the Mage assessment site as well. Furthermore, it was different from Watson's test. The young man had only broken the core of the puppet. He even had to redo all the puppets. He did not know if he would be able to rest for half a day. With a solemn mood, Theo cultivated for more than 3 hours before he crawled out of the pit, panting. At that moment, he saw a young girl with long yellow hair walking toward him with a broken sword at her waist. Everyone was astonished. Although that young girl was gorgeous, her face carried a travel-like aura. It was as if she had traveled a great distance to come here. She bowed to her surroundings amidst the crowd's exclamations. It's the sword mistress. She has returned from the City of Steel. Isn't she 20 years old this year? Why is she here to participate in the assessment? The young lady drew her broken sword and walked toward the Warrior assessment grounds. It was as if countless sword shadows flashed past in front of her, yet it was also as if there was only one sword shadow. In the Warrior assessment grounds that had just been repaired, the puppets were destroyed once again. It was not just the puppets in that area, but the puppets in the other 3 assessment zones were also cut open by an invisible force. Christina Frederick from the current Sword Saints family, assessment result full score. The teacher trembled as he recorded the young woman's result. The girl seemed to be very calm about all that. She bowed again, turned around, and left silently. The whole place was shocked by that scene. It was utterly silent until a student's voice sounded in Theo's ears. Master Theo, now all the assessment sites have been damaged. What should we do? What should we do? You only know how to ask me what to do. How would I know? It's not enough for me to repair the puppets once a day, and I still have to fix them repeatedly. If that goes on, I'll die of exhaustion sooner or later. Go and find the other teachers in the academy. I won't do it anymore. Theo was furious. As he spoke, he ignored the few students who were obstructing him and walked out. At the same time, he raised his head and looked at the yellow-haired young lady who had disappeared into the academy, muttering to himself. I've seen 4 students with full marks today. What's going on with the Royal Academy this year? Aren't the new students too strong? Even the sword mistress has come here. Is that the sword saint's intention? With so many evildoers around, it looks like the school will become very lively in the future. There are so many people in the tavern as expected for a place where the Severed Fingers gang would gather. It's really lively. Watson stood in the royal city, not far from the city gate. In a remote tavern in a narrow alley, he compared the information in his mind. There was a half-broken plaque in the tavern with the words, "Three-legged cat," written on it. One could vaguely see a group of half-naked men holding beer brewed from whole wheat, knocking against each other's mugs. They drank until their faces were red. What was strange was that those people were more or less missing a piece of their fingers. Three-legged cat? What a strange name! According to the information given by Elvin, among the 10 leaders of the Severed Fingers, the person codenamed Left Ring Finger is in charge of most of the wine business in the kingdom, and one of his subordinates is the owner of that bar. Previously, in the floating city, Watson had obtained information about the other 9 leaders of the Severed Fingers from Elvin. He needed to take over the Severed Fingers gang. Having made up his mind, Watson tidied his clothes, kicked open the wooden door with his foot, and walked into the tavern. Hey! The burly men who had been drinking earlier all stopped their actions and revealed vigilant expressions. When they saw that the person was a 12 or 13-year-old boy, the vigilance in their eyes slightly weakened, and many of them laughed out loud. Why is a child here? Is he lost? Judging from the child's clothes, he should be an aristocrat. Maybe he's not lost but attracted to the women in the tavern. The men held their wine glasses and extended their rough hands toward the maids holding their wine. The women were dressed like bunnies, and they screamed when the men touched them. I'm here to look for the boss. Which one of you is the boss here? Watson did not care about their crazy words. The corners of his mouth curled upward, revealing a tender smile as he asked that question. I'm the boss here, kid. Why are you looking for me? A man holding a cane quickly walked out from the depths of the tavern. When he saw that man, Watson knew why that tavern was called Three-Legged Cat. The boss looked like a fat Garfield cat, and the boss' right foot was a prosthetic made of high-quality metal. Nothing, I just want to talk business with the boss. Oh? What do you want to talk about? If you want to talk about milk and cribs, I can't agree to it. The tavern owner's words made the drunkards burst into laughter again. I don't want to talk about that. I want to sell a batch of wine in the kingdom, but I lack a suitable venue, so I hope you can transfer the tavern to me for free. Watson's smile was still the same, but there was a hint of fearlessness in it. Chapter 370, Cleaning Up the Underground Forces in Royal City. Kid, did I mishear you? You want me to transfer that tavern to you for free? Are you crazy? After hearing Watson's words, the tavern owner came in front of him. He bent down and stuck his greasy face in front of Watson. He threatened in a low voice. This is not a place where you can behave atrociously. No matter who you are or what your purpose is, I'm going to count to 3. Get out immediately, or I'll kill you. Do you understand me? Boom! Almost as soon as he finished his words, the tavern owner's head came into close contact with the ceiling. Watson raised his right leg high and kicked the tavern owner's chin, causing the fat boss to hit the ceiling. The older man fell back onto the ground like a ball beside Watson's feet, spitting out a mouthful of blood. D******. Someone is causing trouble here. Come, quickly. Following the boss voice, the tavern became even more lively. A group of burly men stood up one after another and pulled out knives, shields, and other things from under the table. Some people even picked up tables, chairs, and benches. You dare to cause trouble in our tavern? Do you not want to live anymore? Watson only smiled and opened his palm. Absolute gravity. Whoosh! In just an instant, the burly men who had just gotten up fell to the ground at an even faster speed. Their faces came into close contact with the ground. Whether it was the tables, chairs, benches, or knives in their hands, they all crashed into the ground and shattered. What's going on? Why can't we move? A group of people had terrified expressions on their faces as they felt the tens of times greater gravity around their bodies. Not only could they not move, but they also could not even move their fingers. As members of the Severed Fingers gang, there were many Silver-tier elites among them. However, in front of the gravitational force released by Watson, they behaved the same as the others. That scene made the members of the Severed Fingers gang know that the young man in front of them was not simple, he was at least a mage above gold tier. This tavern looks much quieter. Now, I'll ask you a question. Watson walked to the boss and stepped on the boss back. He still had a tender smile on his face. Where is Left Ring Finger? So you're here for our boss? Do you think I'll tell you? The boss spat out a mouthful of blood and said disdainfully, let me tell you. Those who lost their fingers have been professionally trained. Even if we were to die here, we wouldn't tell you anything. That's right, we won't. It was not just the owner, but the rest of the Severed Fingers gang members also responded one after another. Is that so? Then let me change the question. What kind of businesses do you manage here? Other than alcohol, how many similar taverns do you have under your name? Don't waste your energy, kid. You won't be able to get anything out of us. I advise you to let us go now. Otherwise, when our boss finds out what happened here, he will make you disappear even if you are a young master from a noble family. We have done that many times before. The tavern owner sneered and spat on the ground. The disdain on his face became even more intense. Watson did not waste his breath. He extended his right hand and pointed at the two members shouting the loudest among the crowd. System fusion, activate. Congratulations, Master, for successfully fusing two bronze-tier humans. You have obtained a silver-tier attendant. Silver-tier attendant. Ability, grasps silver-tier water elemental combat aura. There is nothing special about it. The two members who had been fused were a tall and thin youth and a short and fat middle-aged man with tanned skin. At that moment, the two figures seemed to have been neutralized and became well-proportioned. Greetings, Honorable Master. Please give me an order. Tell me, what is the main business here and how many similar places are there? This place is ruled by Left Ring Finger from the Severed Fingers gang. We are responsible for wine sales, including high-tier red wine for the noblemen and some inferior wine mixed with special ingredients to pass as good wine. Left Ring Finger has more than 200 businesses similar to this tavern in the entire royal city. It is considered a relatively small place. There aren't many customers, and only our own people drink wine here every day. In larger places, the money for a day's worth of wine is no less than 1,000,000 gold coins. The fused subordinate told Watson everything he knew. Everyone there was stunned, including the boss. What kind of magic is that? No, that is sorcery. What kind of magic could turn two people into one and make them so obedient? They had never even heard of such a thing, let alone seen it before. They all said that the unknown was the scariest. Not understanding Watson's method made everyone present a little afraid. They were fearful that they would be the next to be turned into that. If they turned into that, they might as well die. It seems like this person does not know much about Left Ring Finger as an ordinary member. I have to ask the boss. Watson did not get any helpful information. He muttered in his heart and looked at the boss in front of him. The boss' body trembled. Watson thought that the boss would not reveal a single word even if he died there and would still resist for a while. However, at that time, he did not open his mouth. The boss' lips trembled as he said, "Young master, I will tell you if you don't attack me. Then you have to tell me in detail. If you're hiding something, you won't be here later. I'll fuse all of you to become my subordinates." Watson crouched as the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. It was a calm tone, but it made everyone present involuntarily shiver. Not far from the Three-Legged Cat Tavern, in a manor located in the southwest corner of the capital, lush jungle trees could be seen everywhere in the manor. In the woods were beautiful lakes and fountains that had been artificially repaired. In that stunning scenery, a man dressed in a black gown sat on a round wooden table in the middle of the lawn, humming a song as he mixed bottles of wine placed on the table in front of him. "Count Grey, please taste this wine and see what year it is from." The man in a black gown had his hair carefully groomed, but the few hairs on his forehead could not be suppressed. Under the messy hair was a pair of unruly eyes. The Count was sitting in front of a man with a big belly and a shiny face. A black cloth covered his eyes. After hearing that, he lifted the wine cup in his hand and tasted it. "This wine should be from the Raphael winery. It should be 5 years old, no, 8 years old. Congratulations, Count Grey. Other than the place of origin, you are wrong about everything else." The man in formal clothes clapped his hands. The Count immediately pulled the black cloth strip. When he saw the bottles and jars in front of him, he could not help but look surprised. "These wines are not from Raphael winery. To mix and match the taste of 8-year-old red wine from the Raphael winery with different vintages, you are indeed worthy of your title as the most famous bartender in the royal city. May I ask about the recipes for those wines? How much cheaper would it be to mix the wine in that way than the original wine?" "Count Grey, you flatter me. There are more than 20 kinds of recipes used for that wine. Even though there are many types, the wine should be 1 to 2 years old. A normal bottle of 10-year-old F.A.T.C.A.T.S winery's red wine fluctuates between 100 to a few hundred gold coins, but the total value of those recipes I used doesn't exceed 1 gold coin. The price of 1 gold coin is still a little high. I hope you can reduce the cost to 1 silver coin. Can you do it?" "I'll try my best." As the unruly man spoke, he gently rubbed the ring finger of his left hand, revealing a meaningful smile. "I'm afraid you won't have the chance to try." At that moment, the manor's door was pushed open, and a young man walked in from the outside. Behind the young man were people from the Three-Legged Cat Tavern. Each of them had a complicated expression on their faces, and their bodies were covered in injuries. "Donder, shouldn't you be at the Three-Legged Cat Tavern? Why are you here? And who is that young man? Donder, I remember telling you not to disturb me when I'm discussing business with others without my orders." As he spoke, a person stood up. That person was not the unruly bartender but a greasy-looking count. He was frowning and reprimanding those from the tavern in a reprimanding tone. "Bartender, please leave for a moment. I'll talk to you about the wine formula when I have time." "Yes, Count Grey." The bartender stood up, bowed respectfully, and left the courtyard without looking back. "Count Grey, please save us. That young man went to the Three-Legged Cat Tavern to cause trouble and injured many of our people. He is powerful, and we are no match for him." The owner of the tavern, Donder, looked aggrieved and explained helplessly. "It seems that you are left ring finger Count Grey, that's right." Watson compared it to the information he had obtained in the floating city. Who would have thought that one of the Severed Fingers gang members was a count? No wonder the gang's network of connections could spread throughout the kingdom, and no one could manage it. With the nobleman's protection, even if someone reported the Severed Fingers gang, the information would be suppressed. At the same time, the noblemen would become the heads of any underground forces. One could see just how corrupt the kingdom was. "I'm Count Grey. Who are you?" "This is the Severed Fingers gang's territory. If you're here to cause trouble, I'd advise you to give up on that idea. There are at least 800 corpses buried under this manor. They were all sent here for various reasons, and in the end, they died here. I don't want you to become the next corpse." Grey did not panic at all. He clapped his hands, and many guards immediately walked out from every corner of the manor. Among those guards, the lowest was a silver-tier elite, and the highest was a gold tier warrior. Hundreds of silver and gold tier elites surrounded the manor, making it impossible for anyone to pass through. Each of them had a weapon in their hands and circulated their combat aura, aiming at Watson. "Brat, I told you to look for our boss. You're going to be in trouble soon. Even if you confuse people with magic, how can you do it with so many people?" The gang members looked at Watson with hatred in their eyes, cursing in their hearts. They were looking forward to seeing Watson's miserable appearance. However, what surprised them was that Watson only smiled and lightly stomped his feet. Absolute seal kneel. The combat aura in all the elites immediately disappeared. They could not even stand where they were. They kneeled on the ground with difficulty, their faces filled with pain. Count Grey, who was protected by those people in the center, had a calm expression on his face. At that moment, he changed his expression and cried out in surprise. "That ability is similar to the strictly enforced words spell. You are a platinum tier expert. Who are you?" "My name is Watson. Please remember my name because we will be interacting with each other frequently in the future." Watson extended his right hand toward Count Grey. "System fusion, activate." Following the fusion, the hundreds of guards that had fallen on the ground turned into streaks of light and fused into Grey's body. "Congratulations, Master, for fusing a large number of elites. You have obtained a Platinum Tier Attendant, Count Grey." "Platinum Tier Attendant, Count Grey. He is in charge of most of the wine business in the kingdom, and his territory is located in the southwest of the kingdom." Abilities: Combat Aura Mastery, Mastery of all Platinum Tier Combat Aura, Wind Elemental Magic Mastery, Water Element Magic Mastery, Wine Pool Country, Water Elemental Platinum Tier Spell that turns water into wine, causing large-scale damage, causing the person within the damage area to lose consciousness temporarily. Hurricane Barrier, Wind Elemental Platinum Tier Magic, able to summon a barrier to block attacks of the same level. Sky Assaulting Water Dragon, Platinum Tier Combat Skill. Able to summon a water dragon when unleashed, Additional abilities: Drunken Rampage, when drunk, combat power increases, but intelligence decreases. Enticement, can use money or other items to bribe others and force an agreement. Watson nodded in satisfaction and turned his head. Plop! Plop! Donder and the others, who were behind him, knelt on the ground, their teeth chattering. Watson had fused hundreds of silver-gold elites with Count Grey right in front of them. That feeling was even more shocking than when Watson revealed his Platinum Tier strength and used Platinum Tier magic to kill those people. "Young Master Watson, please don't kill us. We joined the Severed Fingers gang because we had no choice. We just want to make a living." Donder spoke first as he kowtowed. In his opinion, Watson was targeting Severed Fingers because he had a grudge against it. He thought that it would be fine if he left the Severed Fingers gang. "Yes, Master Watson. I have an 80-year-old mother at home and a baby waiting to be fed. If you kill me, they will die too," a subordinate next to him said, but his words were immediately questioned. "Jason, I remember that you are not married. Where did you get the child? Isn't your mother only 60 this year? Shut up. Can't I get married in secret? Also, who told you that is my real mother?" The Severed Fingers member named Jason was furious and shouted to defend himself. Such a scene was not rare in the crowd. That group of people from the Three-Legged Cat Tavern had been scared out of their wits. They were considered ordinary employees with the lowest status. Even Count Grey had been fused in front of them. They did not have much to say. "All right, everyone, be quiet. Don't worry. I don't intend to kill all of you." Watson waved his hand. His voice had a trace of combat aura. Everyone who heard his voice obediently shut their mouths and did not dare to say anything else. "Grey, come here and tell me which other members are still in the royal city. Where are they?" "Yes, Master. Other than me, there are other members in the capital, including Right Pinky, who is in charge of the slave and pornographic business, and Right Thumb, who is in charge of the sale of military weapons. The former should be in the black market, while the latter is an official of the capital city defense department. They should be working in the office at the moment. Count Grey knelt on one knee and replied respectfully. Very well. I will be leaving for some time. I want you to gather all your subordinates. I have something to announce later. Yes, master. That day was destined to be a tragic day for the Severed Fingers gang. Their years as an underground force in the kingdom had been burned to ashes because of a single youth. D***MN, who are you? What are you doing? Snick was naked and covered in blood as he curled up in a corner. He was Right Pinky from the Severed Fingers gang. He was a powerful leader with tens of thousands of people under him. However, he looked helpless as he faced the young man who was gradually approaching him. Beside him was a large bed. On the large bed were two similarly naked beauties who had already died. The two beauties had iron chains wrapped around their necks, and their bodies were covered in bruises. It was apparent that they had been treated cruelly before they died. The wicked man was enjoying the slaves he had just captured from other parts of the kingdom just a moment ago. That was before the youth kicked the door open and walked in without saying anything. He slapped Snick into a corner. After seeing him torture the two women to death, the youth's expression turned cold as he said, "Are you even human to do such a thing?" Human? Snick did not know what that was. Could humanity be used as food in exchange for enjoyment? Obviously not, just like how humanity could not protect his life then. What could save his life was ruthlessness. Take down that hateful killer for me. I'm going to chop him up and feed him to the dogs later. As Snick shouted, the wall behind him broke. A group of guards armed with silver longswords and wearing the same type of armor rushed into the room, protecting him like an iron bucket. Before Snick could smile, he saw the youth in front of him extend his fingers at him. System fusion, activate. Snick looked in surprise at the guards in front of him turning into light one by one. Even his own body began to melt. That was the last thing he saw.